Alright, hopefully I am live. This is actually my first YouTube live stream ever, so I will hopefully get the hang of this as the month goes on working through the Woodpecker method course. Let me make sure things are good here. Let's do this. Does show live on my side. And okay, hopefully things are good. Looks good on my end. And looking forward to working through the Woodpecker method here. Welcome to anybody who has either been waiting or showed up here on time. That's awesome of you. And yeah, so the goal of the day, I do have a bit of a kind of plan for at least day one here. The Woodpecker method is a course. I'm going to be doing it as a course on Chessable. I think that's just the simplest way to do it, rather than opening the book up physically or having the book on my computer or something like that. At least for the Woodpecker method, one book, the tactical exercises, I'll be doing it as a course on Chessable. And as mentioned in the live stream announcement, there are 1,128 different puzzles in this course. They are split into a grouping of different chapters. I kind of scroll around here and make sure you guys can see them. Apologies, but hopefully I'm back. Let me see if it's good on my YouTube side of things. Let's try this again here. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I think we're back on my side of things. Sorry about that. Not sure how that dropped off, but I think we are good. And let me click around a little bit here. Okay, so as I had said, I guess before the stream kind of blipped there for a second, hopefully it's all good now. Fahim did let me know that there were issues with the stream, but yeah, hopefully I'm back. And yeah, so there are, I think as I was saying previously, there are 1,128 different puzzles in the course. And the goal for today is going to be to go through the easy exercises chapter. That's kind of the goal that I'd set out. There are 222 different puzzles in this chapter. It says 223 here in the course. One of those variations is kind of just like a little introduction blip there, I would say. And so, yeah, I have gone through part of this course previously, not the whole thing. And it was also a very long time ago when I did it. But I went through a little bit of it in the past, probably a number of years ago. Never went through the whole thing. So that's going to be the goal for the next month or so, is going through the whole entire course, kind of chapter by chapter, and then trying to work our way through it. Eventually, work through the whole entire set of 1,128 puzzles, and then do it in half of the time on the second cycle, do it in another half of the time in the third cycle, and keep it going until we eventually are able to solve all the puzzles within one day. Hello, Lily the Ghost. Nice to see you here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it, and we will get started. So this is the easy exercises chapter. Looks like this is probably a picture of Mikhail Tal, as far as I can tell. Gives a little quote here. You must take your opponent into a deep, dark forest where 2 + 2 = 5, and the path leading out is only wide enough for 1. One of my favorite players of all time. Crazy attacking player, and lots of cool sacrifices. Hey, Elder Scrolls 6 News, I believe. Hi there, I have your Binko course and I'm a big fan. Hey, that's awesome. Glad to hear that. Thank you very much. thanks for the support. Hopefully you've enjoyed the course, and hopefully you'll enjoy the woodpecker method that we worked through here. All right, let's get into it. We've got our first puzzle. I know the way that the book is structured is that I believe they kind of start off with, well, first of all, I think every puzzle involves a world champion or a previous world champion, as far as I understand. And I think that it starts off with the kind of early days of world champions. So this one, for example, is Wilhelm Steinitz. And we're going to see a bunch of his games and positions to begin with. And these are going to be relatively easy puzzles, so I will be going through them. I will give some explanation and stuff like that and talk with you guys in the chat, but I'm also going to make sure that I'm kind of getting through the puzzles at a relatively good clip and good speed, because I do want to try to solve all of them eventually within one day. So first one here is going to be rook takes h2 check, as far as I can tell, and then rook to h8 delivers the checkmate along the h-file. That's a nice one. Another Steinitz one. King doesn't have a lot of squares to move to. We have a bishop that's kind of eyeing the king at this point, but our pawn on d5 is in the way. The bishop is blocking the pawn. So I think we can play rook f8 check, d6 check, because of the discover check, take the bishop, and we get a nice little crisscross, sort of like a Boden's mate-esque position. That looks to be a good checkmate. They do give little hints here. I don't know if I need the hint. Can I turn off the, if I turn off the titles, you don't see the players' names, which is a little bit unfortunate, but okay. So this one here, I believe we can take the knight, and then there is this lineup of pieces along the file with the bishops lined up. So I think once the knight is dealt with and the pawn on e5 is gone, then we're going to be able to push the pawn up to e5. And yeah, black cannot avoid losing a piece here. They move the d6 bishop, we get the bishop on the d7 square behind it. Alright, good. Black's move on this one here. Let's see, really cool idea for a run. I heard this book, Chessable Course. Puzzles aren't that great, even though the method is fantastic. Have you any thoughts? I considered buying the course, but was unsure. As I don't know, I said a little bit earlier on that it's my first time going through, let's say, like the full entire book or course. I've looked and solved various puzzles from this book or course, but never gone through the whole thing, especially never done the actual woodpecker method with it before. As far as I remember with some of the puzzles, I think that some of them, the authors kind of, I don't know, let's say like kind of make the moves last, make the puzzle last a bit longer than it needs to. But I think that the Chessable course version of this kind of, I believe, fixes that problem as far as I'm aware. Because with the Chessable version, they can kind of cut the puzzle at a certain point without making you play a bunch of moves that don't really work with the tactical side of things, I guess is a way of putting it. I'll probably have more, more feedback or more thoughts on the course once I go through the whole thing. But yeah, I have heard the same things, but we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna go through it and see, I'll get my impressions after that, I guess. This one here, our queen on e4 is attacked. I think we can check on d2, because if the rook takes us on d2, then we take the queen on b1. And yeah, if the king moves to the back rank, then we have the move queen h1 checkmate, I believe. King e1 or king f1, queen h1 is checkmate in both of those cases. So white would pretty much have to take the rook, and then we can check on d2 a second time and eventually take the queen on b1. Okay, so here we have a pretty common idea with the line, kind of the combination of events. We have bishop takes f7 followed by knight takes e5, attacking the king on f7 as well as the bishop that's on the g4 square. So at the very least, we're picking up one pawn here if black doesn't take the bishop, and if he does take the bishop, I think we're getting 2 pawns. So we take this, take with check, we break the pin because we're attacking the king, and then wherever the king moves, we take the bishop. And even if, even if black trades on g4, we have the queen on d1 that's attacking the bishop at the same time. All right, white's move on this one. Looks like it's actually Steinitz on the receiving side of a tactic here. I think we have some kind of bishop a5 idea. If we can get rid of the knight that's on c6. However, if we play something like bishop takes c6, black can recapture with the bishop, and then they are counterattacking our queen on a4, which is kind of an annoying point here. So, excuse me, so I think we go ahead and take with, I think we take with the rook on c6, and then regardless of which way black recaptures, then we can make the pin, and our bishop on b5 kind of shields the diagonal towards the queen on a4. So we're not going to lose our queen. I think we take with the rook, then play the pin, and yeah, black can take our bishop if they want to on b5 with the pawn, but then we can take the queen with check. It's also nice that the a7 pawn is pinned after that. Okay, rolling along. I see the bishop on c4 being attacked one time. I also see this idea of pawn to f3, trying to attack the queen and threaten checkmate simultaneously. And the queen cannot take the pawn because then the bishop would be left unprotected at that point. So I think pawn to f3, threaten mate and the queen. If white tries queen f1 to protect the checkmate and keep the bishop defended, I think we can just take the bishop in that situation. And I think we're winning a piece. So I believe pawn f3. Okay, if the queen takes the pawn, we can just take the bishop. And we are just up a piece in this position. Looks like Steinitz receives this tactic as well, looks like. There is a check on e3. However, the queen would just take the knight. I can take the bishop on c4. Once white recaptures, knight to e3 check attacks the king as well as the queen that's on c4. And I think at that point we are just picking up a piece. The king will have to move somewhere, and then we'll take the bishop, or sorry, we'll take the queen that's on c4 at that point, and then we'll be up a piece in that position. So just got to make sure the move order is correct. Take the bishop first, then make the check, then win the queen, and then we're up a piece. All right, white to play here. The rook is attacked and defended once. The knight is attacked and defended once. The commonality of these is the king on c6. Usually it's not a great situation if you have one piece attacking, if you have one piece defending two pieces simultaneously. And so usually what you can do is either attack the piece that's kind of defending everything, or you can capture one of the pieces followed by taking the second. We don't really have a way to hit the king right now, but as far as I can tell, we can take the knight first, then take the rook, and we're not actually ahead a piece because we were actually down a knight, but we are ahead 2 pawns, and the A and B pawns will definitely help white to win the game, it looks like. Alright, next one here. Equal material. King is kind of exposed, you could say. I think we have queen takes f6, pawn takes, and bishop f8 looks to be checkmate there. The king can't go to g5 because of the pawn. The king can't go to f6 because of the bishop. g7 is also covered. So I think we have a checkmate here. Queen takes knight, bishop f8, and we get the checkmate. White's move here. Let's see. Hey, what's up? Personally, I've done the Woodpecker method. I encourage everyone to do the method. Oh, that's very cool, Abhinav. Very nice to have you here. Maybe I'll have to get some tips and advice as we get into the more difficult puzzles. Right now we're chugging along pretty well, but I'm assuming the more difficult ones get a bit trickier. I'm kind of curious, like, you went through it and encourage everybody to do it. Like, did you have, like, good improvement, you know, before and after completing it, or kind of what was your experience after you had completed it? Kind of curious about people's results, you could say. Okay, so black's threatening checkmate on this one. We have bishop check, but black just takes there. I mean, if we take the rook, they take that. If we check here, they just take our queen and then play king g7, and I don't really see a follow-up. Would be nice if bishop h6 was checkmate there, but the bishop would not be defended. So I do remember reading in the introduction to this course or to this book that there are puzzles that don't result in a win. So this might be one of those. We can play the move bishop e4. If the rook takes, we get checkmate on f8. And if the queen takes, I guess we have bishop f6 check and some kind of perpetual check. So it's not a win, but it is a draw. What are we? We're down a pawn at the start. We don't have a great way to protect this pawn. I guess there's queen f3, but even then, black just trades and brings the rook down, and that looks quite bad for us. So I think this is probably one that's not a win. I'm, as far as I can tell, bishop e4 gets a draw at least, which is better than nothing. And if they don't take the bishop, I'm making this kind of skewer. So I think they have to take. Yeah, so I think we just give the check. We do this perpetual check. Yeah, okay. So it says white has a perpetual on f6 and f7. So king goes to g8, we go to f7, and then we get the draw. Okay, so this is kind of a draw tactic, you could call it, rather than a win. So, okay, so I have to keep in mind that I guess some of the puzzles will be like that. Let's see. Yes, it was wonderful. I've drastically improved my calculations and tactical ability. Now try the Anthology of Chess Combinations. I was actually thinking, I don't know if I've heard of that specific book, the Anthology of Chess Combinations. I've heard of the one, what is it, like is Encyclopedia of Chess Combinations? Is that maybe the same book, or is that a different version? I was thinking that after doing the Woodpecker method, like this particular book and course, I thought it would be really interesting to try doing the same method with the Encyclopedia of Chess Combinations, which is as far as I'm aware, like a much more difficult book, much more difficult puzzles. I thought that that would actually be very interesting, but I wanted to, you know, let's say finish the original Woodpecker method first before trying to do, you know, a much more difficult version. But yeah, glad to hear that you drastically improve your calculation tactical ability. Yeah, I think that's the one. Yeah, I think you're right, Elder Scrolls. Yeah, I think that's the one with like 3,000 puzzles. They're also all like incredibly difficult. Even the basic chapters are still quite tricky. I have looked a little bit into like the intermediate and advanced chapters of that course, and they're just very tough. I would imagine that somebody like let's say Gukesh, right? Probably somebody like Gukesh would be able to do that kind of stuff without too much trouble. And I would imagine if somebody could, let's say Woodpecker method that, oh, it's a different book. Okay, so we're thinking of different ones, but, you know, maybe the same idea. A bigger book, more puzzles, and maybe a little more advanced for all I know. Yeah, I would imagine that doing the, you know, Encyclopedia of Chess Combinations in a Woodpecker style, first of all, it'd be incredibly difficult, I imagine. But, I mean, if you could do it, I think it would be, like, supercharging your calculation abilities for sure. This one, I think you check, king moves, and I think rook f8 check. Queen takes, and you take on h7. I think I've seen this kind of pattern or puzzle before, so we get the checkmate here. All right. Black's move on this one. Black's pieces just look very passive. The knight on a4 is kind of weirdly placed. We don't have any great checks. Taking this bishop doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. We have knight c3 though, right? Knight c3, if the bishop takes, we get the rook because this knight's blocking the defense. And I guess white has to, if they do not take the knight and they move the queen, they have to keep the bishop defended somehow, but they can't really do that, right? Queen d1, I have that covered. Queen d3, I trade the queens. And then I take the bishop or check on e2. So I think knight c3 is taking advantage of this kind of pin. Oops, that's a bad arrow. I think it's taking advantage of this kind of pin as far as I can tell. So yeah, knight c3, I think. Okay, yeah, we're up the exchange. We get the job done here. Here's the fun question: Gukesh or Ding? Who are you rooting for? Personally, I'm rooting for Ding. He seems like such a nice man. If you had asked me this, like, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, when Ding was like, let's say if you'd asked me after Ding won the world championship previously, like, would he be the favorite to win a second world championship? My answer would be maybe or probably. But at this rate, right now, Gukesh is looking like a pretty good favorite in my opinion. I hope it's a close match. That's my biggest hope, let's put it that way. I hope that Gukesh doesn't just run away with it. I hope that Ding either keeps it close, or if Ding wins, I mean, that's awesome too. I do like Ding. He's just been having a really rough go of things recently, so I don't know. It'd be hard to not bet on Gukesh, but I would like Ding to make it a fight for sure, no question. I don't want to see a blowout. And even if somehow Ding made it a blowout, which I don't think is going to happen, I wouldn't really want to see that either. I just want to see a close match that goes down to the wire. The match against Nepo was great. I mean, it went all the way down to the wire. Caruana versus Carlson, when they played each other, 12 straight draws. Maybe 12 draws is not the most fun thing, but it went down to the wire. Yeah, anything that goes down to the wire I think is really cool. Am I doing the Woodpecker method where I do it 7 times? So my goal, I have this on like a side spreadsheet. The way that I want to do it is kind of an accelerated method, and this is going to kind of depend on how fast we get through things. My goal is actually to do the entire, to work down the cycles and eventually do the entire course within about 3 weeks is my goal. That's probably a very ambitious and maybe overly ambitious goal, but I want to do, let's say, maybe like the whole course in 7 days, then cut it down to 3.5-ish days, then cut it down to somewhere in the 2-day range, eventually cut it down to 1, and probably take about 3 weeks to do it. Because I also have the plan of I would actually really like to do the Woodpecker Method 2 book as well. But I'm not going to, let's say, kill myself to absolutely do it in 3 weeks. So I would like to do that. I have a bit of a scheduled spreadsheet on the side here, but we'll see if that actually happens. Okay, this one I think is rook takes d3 and then queen e1 check. That looks like the idea. Oops, sorry. That looks like the idea here. If the queen takes, you check on e1, and you get the checkmate. So I think you pick up the pawn. Okay, so if white doesn't take the rook, what do you do here? I would imagine you just double the rooks up, right? Is there anything better? This is kind of an example of what we were talking about earlier, where like I've already executed the tactic, you could call it. I won the pawn, and black's position looks fantastic regardless of what I play. So you could kind of argue that the tactic side of things is kind of done here, but I think doubling up the rooks and going to d1 with check looks to be very good too. Okay, yeah, it's going to make me play it all the way through. And yeah, I mean, this is definitely game over. King takes knight, I even have knight e3 check to pick up the bishop. Let's see. Oh, I agree totally. I just mean, who do I personally like? I like Gukesh. That's going to sound like a very boring cop-out answer at this point because he's just been dominating everything recently, but I like Gukesh. My personal favorite player is Nordibek Abdusaturov, at least from, let's say, like the new generation of young kids. I really like Erigaisi as well. I like Erigaisi because he kind of gained a lot of rating points in these open events, which is more on the rare side of things. But yeah, I mean, I like Gukesh, Erigaisi, Abdusaturov. Those are like 3 of my favorite players. Obviously, that's also going to sound like a cop-out answer since they're like the 3 highest-rated young guys. But they all play like super interesting chess. And Gukesh is just a monster at calculation as far as the games I've looked at. But Ding was fantastic in his prime. I mean, Ding was the guy who won like what 100 games in a row, or not won 100 games. Sorry, he had a 100-game like streak where he didn't lose any games. I mean, that's tough to do. I think Carlson beat that, but I mean, Carlson's gonna beat a lot of records. Okay, let's see on this one. I feel like I've seen this kind of pattern before. I think we take the rook and checkmate on e1. I think I've seen this one. Maybe not this exact position, but I've seen this kind of pattern. Yep, so we get the mate. Feels like some King's Gambit type of position. We would like the queen on h5 giving a check, the knight's in the way. So the question is, do we take the pawn or go to e5? I gotta imagine taking the pawn is better. I mean, you pick up a pawn at least in the process. Knight e5, I guess I guess black could play, like, maybe knight takes e5 and cover f7, I'm not sure. I think knight takes g5 is the move, followed by the check. And then if king e7, you have queen f7 check, king d6, and then some kind of bishop a3 check, e5. There's for sure a mate around the corner here. It looks like the game continued this way. Fortunately, it doesn't make you play out the entire thing, because there's a ton of ways to win from this position, I assume. Okay, next one. Let's see. Still a King's Gambit, which was always a super common opening in this, 1800s time frame. Bishop's undefended. I'm lining up towards it. If I move the knight, I can take the bishop. I need to move the knight and make a threat at the same time. So I can take the pawn followed by taking the bishop with check. That does net a pawn. I'm kind of wondering if pawn to d5 is also good, because if I kick the knight, then I take the pawn anyways, but maybe black has some kind of bishop takes knight, knight a5 defense. I think knight takes a7 looks to be like the simplest, yeah, so this nets us a pawn, which is pretty nice. I think this is another bishop takes f7, knight e5 sequence, especially when the bishop on g4 is undefended, so that looks to be the idea here. What do I think about Alireza Firouzja? Watching him lately, he seems absolutely insane, an incredible mind, and IMO, a future world champion. I remember watching Alireza back when he was playing on chess.com as like an IM and in his early days of GM and being an absolute beast back then. And the fact that he's just, he's kept it up for the most part. He had, he got to 2800, I think. I don't remember if it was faster than Carlsen or as fast, somewhere around the speed that Carlsen did it. But then he dropped down a bit, and the candidates wasn't fantastic for him. But, I mean, yeah, no, recently he's been absolutely crushing it. I have an exam tomorrow. I'm in India, and it's 8 at night, so bye. Have a good interaction. Oh, yeah, very nice for you to tune in for a bit, Abhinav. Hope to see you a different day when I'm doing the live stream, and hope you do well on your exam. I think here we need to get rid of the queen that's defending the checkmate. So rook takes e3 looks good. There is like a rook d1 check, but I think as long as we go to b7 and don't go to a7, which would walk into a check, I think if we go to b7, then I think we're fine. No more checks really for white there, so yeah, rook takes here. And then, yeah, we can also pick the bishop up as far as I can tell. So we net a pawn. It's not winning material, but... it's not winning much material, but it is a pawn. It is a good, honest day's work, you could say. Okay, so it looks like we've moved into Lasker. I think this is another knight takes g5, queen h5, queen f7 sequence as far as I can tell. So we take this, we check. And then, yeah, I guess the game went something like this, and this is game over. I think there's probably a couple of ways to win here, I imagine. You can probably even take the pawn on g5, but yeah, lots of moves are good. I think another knight takes g5. But let's see. This one's a little different. There's no bishop on c4 this time. So knight takes... Let's see here. Knight takes g5, pawn takes. Queen h5 check, king e7. I can take on g5, but the king goes to e8. Do I have anything there? Oh wait, I can go back to h5. King goes back to e7. Queen e. I think eventually I'll have a queen e5 check and take the rook, I believe. Is that correct? Take, check here, check. If the knight blocks, I have e5 to attack the pinned piece, so that's not really an issue. So the king moves back to e8 to keep the queen defended, and then I guess queen e5 check, and I take the rook. Okay, I think that this should work, right? Check. Check. Yeah, okay. I guess it stops the puzzle here. It says king goes back, you check on h5 first. Yeah, because if you check with the queen on e5 first, black gets the e4 pawn, which is still winning for white, I assume, but a little bit trickier. Whereas if you check here, the difference is you take the rook without the queen getting the e4 pawn. So that does win us material for sure. All right, I think here it's another knight e5, queen h5, queen e5 type of sequence. Okay, d5. I didn't actually think about this one. I think you still have queen h5 though, right? Queen h5 check, g6, knight takes, and then you get the rook, and then you have rook e1 check, and there's no way that that can survive for black. The king is just way too exposed, and black is way too far behind on development, so I assume this is the idea. Take this. Maybe you can throw in a check first. Maybe you take the rook first. Maybe you take the pawn. I think if you take the pawn, the king can kind of run away. So I think I'm taking the rook, but it wouldn't surprise me if checking first was also good. But let's take the rook. Okay. I would imagine checking with the rook also works, but yeah, it says that, yeah, or rook e1 check first also works. Okay. First thing I'm noticing is there's kind of an undefended rook. There's some pin problems that are going on here. I think I can go ahead and pick up the bishop. If the pawn takes, I get the rook with check, and then that's an extra piece. And probably checkmate with the back rank. And instead, if the rook takes, I can take the rook on d5, pawn takes, take on c8 check, queen blocks, take the queen, king takes, and then I'm just up a bishop. So yeah, I think I can take on d5 here. Take, take. And then I would take again, and yeah, we're up a piece. Alright. No checks. Not going to capture the rook. Knight a4 is an interference tactic. That seems like the only way to really make any threats in this position. I mean, knight a4, I don't know what else the tactic would be. The rook can go to a3 to stay alive for a moment, but I think I have I either have knight takes pawn or I have queen to b2. Both of those look pretty good. I don't know which one is better. I got to imagine queen to b2, black plays b4, and then maybe then I take the pawn. I'm also attacking the e5 pawn, so I'm winning at least one pawn, if not two pawns here. So I think knight a4. So yeah, the question was, do I take the pawn first or go queen b2 first? I think if I take the pawn, I mean, I got to imagine that's still good. Queen moves away, I play b4 to guard the knight, and then I'm just up a pawn. But I think attacking the rook first is a little bit better. And now the question is, which pawn do I take? If I take c5, he can go to d6 and guard e5, so I think I have to take e5. Because then I take c5 or c7 next move. Okay, yeah, so we're up a pawn. We're going to pick up a second one on c5 or c7. Did I begin playing as a child, or what was my chess journey like? So my dad taught me how the pieces moved and the rules of the game when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Yeah, I was like 7 or 8 years old, but I didn't really do anything with chess at that point. My dad wasn't like a tournament player or competitive with the game or anything like that, for sure. He just, taught me how the pieces moved. That was pretty much it. But around the age of 10, which I guess I was probably in like 5th grade or something like that, I remember I had like a friend in 5th grade, and we found like I don't know, the way I tell the story is like we found a chessboard in the corner of the classroom, and we knew how the pieces moved, but we didn't really know much else, so we just decided to play, chess against each other during class, and I enjoyed it. I found out you could play online back in the old Internet Chess Club ICC days, so I played online. My parents saw that I liked it. They saw that I liked chess. They figured it was probably a pretty good hobby, and they're the ones that kind of found me a local club in the city that I lived in, and I started going to the club regularly, started playing in tournaments, and that's kind of how I started. Played a bunch online, played a bunch of tournaments in person at the club, eventually improved, over the years, and Yeah, I started off at a pretty decent level from what I remember, at least like out of my first tournament. I'll say for this one, I think it's rook takes e5 and queen f3 check. I'm leaning towards that being the tactic here. The nice thing is we take the rook with check, so white doesn't have the chance to perpetual check us on the back, e7 and e8 squares, but because we're taking with a check in the first place. But yeah, I started off at a pretty decent level, but I think that was in my first tournament because I think that was because I was playing online a bunch before then. So my first tournament wasn't like my first experience with playing the game or something like that for sure. And then yeah, I played a bunch over the years, played a bunch of tournaments, hit master level when I was 18 years old, I think. So started in tournaments at 10 years old, 8 years later hit master level, and I've been, kind of doing chess ever since then. I think here we have rook f6, forking the queen and the knight. Knight takes rook, rook takes, and then we're taking the knight on e6 and gaining 2 pieces for a rook, which looks pretty good. There's also no rook g6 to block because our bishop covers that square. We are down a piece, though, so it's not a guarantee that winning 2 pieces for a rook is winning for us, but I imagine the 2 extra pawns on the king side's also pretty good to help us out. So I think we're doing this. Knight takes e6. I think knight takes e6, the queen is recapturing. Or sorry, not even taking on e6. Maybe there's queen takes d2. Our knight on g5 is pinned, so knight takes e6, we might be losing our queen. Rook f8 would almost be mate, but the knight on d7 covers the f8 square. So they could take us on f8, and then the rook on a8 also defends. Pretty close to being an idea that works, but even if black had to, they could also take back on e6 with the queen. I think that would defend for black. Pretty close to working, though. Okay, this one looks like a pretty standard capture the knight, fork, sorry, those are bad arrows. Capture the knight and then make a fork on f6 situation. Yeah, the knight on d7, bit of a good defender there. Yep. So I think we take the knight and then just make a fork, and then take the queen. Looks good. Let's see here. We can take a bishop, but I assume that's not the best move. Seems this is a little bit of the downside of how puzzles work compared to playing actual games. Like in an actual game, you don't know if there's a tactic in this position necessarily. Like taking the bishop would be a very reasonable move in an actual game to first focus on. But because I know it's a tactic, I have to imagine that there's something better than just taking the bishop. Because even if I take the bishop, I'm not ahead material. So I'm leaning towards rook takes g2, king takes, check with the rook, and then once the king goes to the h-file, then I take the bishop with the checkmate. So that looks to be even better. Who was it that said, when you see a good move, look for a better move? It might have been Lasker, might have been Botvinnik. But yeah, this is definitely a better way to play than taking the bishop right away. Queen g7 looks pretty nice. Bishop takes, pawn takes, discovered, double check, checkmate. Not a phrase you get to say every day. Discovered, double check, checkmate. That's a tongue twister. But I think that's a very nice one. I kind of subconsciously saw this. Yeah, if the king moves over, you have rook h8 in this situation. I should have mentioned that, but yeah, rook takes, you still get the pawn there and get the rook to h8. This one looks like knight f6 on first instinct. Pawn takes, take the queen, and then I'm up the exchange. That looks pretty good. This looks like rook takes knight followed by g3 check, and then I fork the king and the rook. I think we'll go for that. Checking here, he can block, so I think I just take the rook. Okay, queen is hit, rook is hit. I also have to watch out for checkmate on the back rank. Don't really have a way to check the king. I mean, I can take the bishop, but he'll just take back. So we have to have some kind of counter-attacking move here. It looks like rook takes f2 is our best bet. If they take our queen, we get their queen. We're up the exchange, and we're in good shape there. If they take our rook, we take their bishop with check, and then we pick up the b4 pawn, and then we're just ahead 2 pawns. That looks pretty good. And then, yeah, we'll take the b4 pawn next. And there's no perpetual checks. We have the h7 square. All right, white's move here. We have passed into the Jose Capablanca category of world champions. I think we probably did that a few puzzles ago. Right, because it was Steinitz was 1. Pretty sure Lasker was 2. Capablanca's 3. I think the next one is going to be Alekhine, or Alekhine, however you want to say it. I've heard it pronounced different ways. And then after Alekhine is... Who beat Alekhine? Smyslov, maybe? Maybe it was Smyslov or something like that. Rook takes knight. Yeah, I think it's either rook takes knight or queen takes rook first. I'm not sure which one first, though. And I don't know if it matters, quite honestly. If we take the knight, if the king takes, we can then eliminate the rook, then check and take the queen. We're up a piece there. If the rook takes back, we take the rook and then fork on f6 and win the piece once again. But I also think that taking the rook, pawn takes, and then taking the knight also works. I don't think it matters which one we do. And usually the puzzles will only have one answer, is my assumption, but I kind of feel like both of these work. I'm going to go with your move, Connor. Rook takes knight. I'm going to go with that one. Okay, it says alternative, find a different move. Okay, so it has to be queen takes rook then. Then rook takes knight. Then the fork. Then the capture. Okay, it does say in the text here, yeah, it says rook takes knight, queen takes g8. It says that's another way to do the same thing. Okay, so I guess this one had 2 answers. Alright, yeah, both work. Yep. I'm used to puzzles having one answer, so that's why I was a little thrown off there. But in an actual game, sometimes there's multiple answers, so bit closer to a game replication. I think we have this kind of connection, you could say, where the queen is protecting both the pawn and the check on e8. Because if we get to check on e8 for free, black cannot block. Or they would have to block, but then we can take the rook on f8 with checkmate. So I think we take the pawn first, and then we check on the back rank on this one. Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah, you guys are getting it right there with me. I don't know if the chat comes in at a slight delay, or if I'm seeing you guys in live time, but we all got this one. Yep, very nice. All right, knight's hit 2 times. Oh, that was a mistake. I did not mean to play queen b4. It's a little annoying. That was a mouse slip. I was trying to draw an arrow. So knight is attacked 2 times, defended 2 times. Rook is hit once and defended once. Pawn on e4 is hit once and defended twice. But as far as I can tell, these pieces both have more important jobs than defending the pawn. Like if the queen moves away, you lose the rook. If the bishop moves away, you take the knight. I think you can take the pawn on e4 first. And then depending on which way white recaptured, I would either take the rook or the knight. Does it matter which piece I take with, rook or queen? I got to imagine taking with the queen is better. But maybe that's not the case, actually. Maybe rook takes is better, because then I line up towards the d pawn. Which one is better? Queen takes is always going to have the slight annoyance that after the queens get traded, we have this opposite color bishop in game. So I would imagine that taking with the rook is better, especially because you're also kind of pinning the d pawn. So that's what I'm going to go for. Okay, yeah, it does say rook takes. Okay, I'm happy about that. Yeah, the tricky part about taking with the queen is that if white trades the queens, you get into an opposite color bishop in game, and that's not so straightforward to draw. I don't know, maybe I can use the analysis board super fast on this one. I don't know how this will work with the screen share. Yeah, it does say rook takes c4 -2, and queen takes c4 -1.6. They're both good. I mean, black is better after either move, but taking with the rook is the preferable of the two. Hopefully that shows up on the on the live stream side of things. But okay, we'll go back to the puzzles. All right, white's move here. Always good to look for checks and captures first. I mean, this is the biggest check that I can see. Then you have bishop d5 as a follow-up. We are down the exchange, but we are ahead a pawn right now. Taking e6 would put us ahead 2 pawns. And we have two protected pass pawns, which is quite nice. So that should be good for us. King e5, there's rook c5 check. And rook takes a5, there's rook to d8. I imagine that rook takes a5 is still good too, though, quite honestly. But I'm going to lean towards this being the way to do it. Yeah, okay, we get the job done. I'm kind of curious if rook takes a5 in the first position was also winning, but I think rook takes e6 is maybe a bit more straightforward. It looks like white won with the passed pawns. Yeah, it's hard to stop both pawns at the same time. Okay. This looks like some kind of queen g5, queen h6, or bishop takes g7 idea. It also looks like if it was black's move, he'd probably be doing the same thing to us, which is kind of funny. So it looks like white kind of beat black to the punch. I think you take on g7, check, and then checkmate on f6 is what it looks like here. This check is covered, right? So can't do that. I would like to check here and hit the king and the rook, but the knight covers this, so I think I'm eliminating the knight and then checking on e5. So I think we go for that, then we pick up the rook, and we are ahead a knight. Very nice. I can't take this bishop because of the pin. What I can do is either g6 or bishop takes pawn first. I guess bishop takes pawn is just much better. And if the king moves over and doesn't take, then I'm just up a pawn and the king is exposed. If he does take, then I have pawn to g6. Okay, he doesn't take. So I have to assume a lot of moves are good. Bishop g6 followed by h6 looks to be pretty much the best way to do it. So that's what I'm going to go for, bishop g6. Okay, so we'll go for that. All right, this one here, I think we have bishop h7 check followed by rook takes c8. Looks to be the right idea. Getting a discovered attack towards that rook. So bishop check, take the rook, and then take again. We could have taken the knight on d7, but then black would have taken our bishop on c2, and that would be equal. Yeah, it says queen takes d7, rook takes c2 is equal. Alright, white's move here. f6 looks pretty good. There's also knight takes pawn, check, rook takes, and then g6. That also looks pretty good. So if I take here and then play g6, right? I mean, is something wrong with that? I guess what black can kind of kamikaze the rook since they're a full rook up at that point. And then maybe they go rook to g7, and that could be a little bit tricky to win. We're probably losing the g6 pawn. So is that doesn't feel like it's winning. So, yeah, take, g6, take with check, block with the rook, bishop back to e8. I feel like black picks up the g-pawn and we're not winning. So, if we're not taking f7, what else are we doing? g6, he just takes there and wins the pawn. f6, he goes to g6, I guess. I think it's still a good position for us, but I don't know if there's a win. Maybe this is one of those where there's not a win, because nothing's really jumping out at me, and it's you know, in the easy puzzle category. So maybe I'm a little, maybe it's a little egocentric of me to think that I should be able to solve it instantly, but I'm not seeing an answer that is super winning here. So what do I do? Maybe f6 and then just kind of improve the position. The rook is kind of trapped on g6 after you play f6. Both of black's rooks are kind of trapped. Maybe this? Okay, then what do I do here? I still can't take this. If black gets the chance, they might be able to take the knight, then the pawn, but I guess I'm protecting h6. That passed pawn looks pretty good. I don't think I move the knight because black checks on h2. So what do I do? Do I just like move the king or the bishop randomly? I'm actually not really sure what the follow-up here is. I mean, I like white's position, but I don't know what move they want me to play. Is the problem. I would imagine, like, well, okay, let's see here. Taking the knight and then taking the pawn is at least a check for black, and then maybe the bishop comes back to cover h7. So maybe I should make sure it's not a check. So king e2 or something? Or bishop f4? King e2. Feels a little odd to put my king on a light square. Feels like it could always be checked or something. Rook to e7, you're saying, Connor? That also looks good. I guess bishop e8. Or maybe black still does the rook takes knight, rook takes f6. Actually, yeah, no, that could actually get us in big trouble. Rook e7, they take the knight, then they take f6, then our rook is lost. We have to be careful there. I imagine it's kind of just a move to get the king off of the f-file, because this rook takes f6 check is always a little annoying. So it's probably just one of these two. Those are bad arrows. It's probably just one of these two moves. I mean... Okay, it says bishop f4 actually works. But I have to imagine, if I use the analysis board real quick, I have to imagine that there's probably lots of moves that are good. Yeah, bishop f4, king e2. I imagine there's other moves that are good too. I don't think rook e7 works though, because I think they take the knight. Yeah, it says rook takes knight, pawn takes, check. I thought king takes, but I guess bishop g5 works. It looks like they can do this though, and this looks like it's actually a draw. Because if you take the rook, you lose your own. So yeah, this is one where a couple of moves win. Okay. Not the cleanest puzzle in the world, in my opinion, but okay, it is what it is. Okay, so this feels like move the knight out of the way, followed by bishop g6 to make the pin. And this is with a fork at the same time, so that's winning material. This feels like taking the knight, followed by the fork on d5 to win material. Oh, okay, takes the knight first. I guess I can take the rook and then the pawn, right? This puts white ahead, what, 2 pawns, I think? Yeah, okay. We're ahead 2 pawns. Hey, how's it going, Ernesto? Long time no see, and hope you're doing well. So, I think here we have bishop a6, rook c6. Looks to be the idea. And then we take the knight on b6, because, yeah, this pawn is kind of protecting these 2 squares. Now, I guess black doesn't have to take the bishop, but if they don't take the bishop, we'll take the pawn on b7 afterwards, so... Okay, that does look like it's the idea. We're up a pawn. Probably going to win a second pawn. Let's see. Feels like some kind of h7, knight f6, bishop h7 kind of idea. But we don't go knight f6 first. The knight would just take back and guard h7. So I think we take on h7 first. The rook is also trapped there. If the king does take the knight, then we have knight f6 double check, discover double check once again, and then we take the queen. I think otherwise, if they don't take the knight, we take the rook, right? They do have f5. Knight takes pawn f5, and our knight's actually pinned as well along the diagonal. Knight takes pawn f5. If we take the rook, they take our knight, which is kind of annoying. I guess you have bishop c4 there, though, right? Bishop c4, queen moves, and I take the pawn on e6, so that should work. I think I also have even knight back to g5, though, right? Does knight back to g5 also work? Because if they take the knight, then I play bishop takes. My knight that's on g5 again protects that, and then I skewer through to the b7 bishop. So take f5. I think taking the rook works, but then maybe they take back, and then my knight's still pinned. So maybe it is knight back to g5. And then, yeah, maybe some queen h5 stuff at the right time. But I think bishop takes e4 and the skewer looks good. So I think that should work. I don't want to take the rook because black takes back and then my knight's still pinned. So I think I just bring this knight back, make the skewer, take the bishop, and then, yeah, we're up a couple of pawns with a good position. It does say knight takes f8, f takes e4, bishop c4. It says this is also winning, apparently. But I thought maybe taking back on f8 worked because the knight was pinned. Oh, maybe you have pawn f3 or something. Like bishop takes f8, pawn f3, then they take the knight, bishop takes, and you get this skewer once again. Okay, so it's another one of these where there's maybe a couple of moves that work, but we win the material and get the job done. Oh, Mohan, I saw your message. I didn't answer it right away. I saw you retracted the message, though. I don't. You could have kept it there, asking about the course. The course is coming out on the converting middle game advantages course is coming out on December 27th. Is what Chessable told me. So I hope it comes out before then. But the let's say the planned published date is December 27th for now. We'll see if we can speed that process up a little bit. Okay, this feels very much like a knight b5, knight takes b5 kind of thing. Black has bishop g3 check, but we take and block with our bishop, and I think this just works out well for us. Take that, block, and then we check on d6 once the queen moves or something like that. Let's see here. So this is rook takes e4, queen a1, right? Just some back rank stuff. That looks pretty good. If the knight was gone, queen h7 is mate, so we just need to get the knight out of the way, most likely. I guess queen g4 check is also worth considering. And if they take the knight, queen h4 to h7 is mate, but they could go to h8. And then I don't see the follow-up there. So I think here maybe it's knight takes pawn. Knight f5 doesn't work because after pawn takes, it blocks the bishop out. So knight takes pawn, rook takes, queen h7, king f8, queen h8. And if he doesn't take the knight, I'm still threatening queen h8 and the queen. So that looks to be the way to go. Check, checkmate. Okay. This looks like rook takes pawn followed by bishop takes d5 check, forking king and queen. He doesn't have to take the rook, but then once, you know, the bishop moves away somewhere, I can take the pawn on a5. I think I'm just going to be up 3, 4, 5. I'm going to be up at least one pawn. So I think we do it this way, and then we win the queen. All right, we have made it to exercise 50. Yeah, so I don't know if have you seen this course before, Ernesto? This is the Woodpecker method course. There's 1,128 puzzles in the course, and the method I've heard about kind of recommended is to try to go through the entire course. Once you've gone through the whole course, then you cut the time in half that it took you to do it, and then you go through it once again. You cut it in half once more, and the goal is to eventually solve all 1,128 puzzles in one day. So that's kind of the let's say the end goal I'm working towards. So it's going to be easy stuff to begin with. It does progressively get more difficult as the book and course goes along. But the goal is to eventually trim it all the way down to being able to do it all 1,128 puzzles in one day, because I've gone through it so many times that it becomes like second nature at that point. It's mostly to build up your pattern recognition. So this one's going to be the rook sacrifice followed by the mate. This looks like bishop takes pawn followed by rook g4. Yeah, we do that. Queen and g2, and then pawn takes his mate on this one, it looks like. This is pawn f3, king g1, queen takes rook, rook d1 mate, I think. I guess the king can move up the board, but then you're still taking the rook, right? So check, check, checkmate. This looks like queen h4 or bishop takes h2 first because you hit the rook and the king. So do you go queen h4, there's g3, right? So bishop takes h2, king takes, check, and then take the rook. Looks quite good. This looks like rook takes f5, then taking the bishop. Don't really see any other forcing moves. Pawn d5 check, the bishop just takes, so we take that and go there. I'm also hanging out with the chat at the same time, so if I wanted to do this off stream, I could probably blitz through it quite quickly, but you know, hanging out with the chat is also pretty fun. So does this help a lot? Do you see these patterns regularly in games? I'm new to chess. Yeah, so I mean, okay, first of all, this is my first day doing this particular course, but it is definitely true in chess that a big part of chess, especially calculation and tactical ability, is pattern recognition. The more patterns you're familiar with, the less you have to think about certain positions, and you kind of already know what to do or already have some hints as to what to do. So pattern recognition is a very big tool in terms of chess improvement. The more patterns you have kind of, let's say, memorized or known in your brain, the better you can play in positions, because you don't really, let's put it this way, like in chess, you don't really need to reinvent the wheel to be good. Or to be strong at the game. You really just need to do stuff that other people that are really good at the game have done themselves. And these patterns do crop up, you know, quite regularly, I would say. Maybe not, you know, I might not see this exact pattern of bishop takes h7 followed by taking the rook in my next, you know, 5 or 10 games, but it's a useful pattern to be aware of, and the more patterns you have built up over time, the better a player you are for the most part. This particular book is all about tactical patterns and exercises. I do want to also go through the Woodpecker Method 2, the sequel book, which is all about positional exercises, but I wanted to work through this one first. So yeah, this one's bishop takes pawn, remove the defender, and then take the rook. If this queen was gone, there's a fork. So then you want to take the rook on e1 with check, and then take check on f3. Or not f3, sorry, f2. Okay, and then the knight's trapped. But we are ahead like 2 pawns, right? So... Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I saw your message in there, and then I saw you retracted it. You can leave the message there. That was no problem. It's not a secret as to when it's coming out, I don't think. I mentioned it in the Chessable forums, so I don't think it's a secret or anything. I think I can just take the knight and then save mine. I'm up 2 pawns, so that should be good enough. I would also imagine knight f4 check and then rook takes f4, getting a 3rd pawn is also good. I'm going to go for this one. Let's see what it says. You could have also achieved a winning position by going for the a pawn, but this is simple. Okay, so there's a couple of different answers on this one. Yeah, alpha chess. I think rook e8 would have also worked. It's one of those puzzles where they have multiple answers. Not my favorite kind of puzzles, but, you know, it is what it is. Alright, knight on e4, hitting the rook on d2. Excuse me, queen is eyeing the knight, so I think I trade knights, push the pawn, hit the queen, and then hit the e4 bishop at the same time. Bro, we gotta go live together. I think people would enjoy. I have some chess ideas, chat. Spicy. Oh, live. Jesus. We gotta go live together. Okay. For some reason, I read that as live, and I was a bit confused, man. Not gonna lie. Go live together. I absolutely know what you're saying now. I was gonna say I don't know if how my wife would feel about that. Yeah, no, we could do a live stream together one day. Would be pretty cool. Okay, so yeah, here we're up a piece. Yeah, no, I figured it out. No worries, man. This would be great if this pawn was gone. Yeah, no, I got it. All good. My fault. So I think we take the pawn on f5, and then we take on d5. I don't know if it matters which one we take with. I imagine knight takes is better just because it's a check, right? And it hits the bishop, so this, that, and then take the queen once the king moves. Okay, this is a knight takes d5, bishop c7. I'm aware of this one not only from previous pattern recognition, but also I had a game from the black side of this. Not where I lost the material and got my queen trapped, but I had some kind of, there was some game I played against a GM in a tournament over the board where, like, he almost did a bad version of this tactic and lost a piece. I remember calculating during the game and realizing it didn't work for him. Here it does work, though. Trap the queen. Bishop f2, queen f2, trade all the stuff, and then rook to d2, check, pick up the bishop on c2. Looks good. Get this guy. And then once the bishop moves, we eventually pick up the a-pawn. No checks from white. Rook takes bishop. Rook takes queen d1. Man, these arrows are bad. Take this, and then queen to d1. Rook blocks, I take, that's mate. But if the pawn takes f3, I guess I have queen to c2 and queen h2, right? Now the question is, I guess there is a check, actually. There is queen b2 check. But then I have bishop e5 to block the check. I think bishop e5 is kind of an important move there because otherwise white would be able to take with the pawn and the queen would protect c2, but I think I have bishop e5 counterattacking the queen. So I think I do this. And yeah, okay, they didn't make the check, so I go straight into c2. Nothing white can do to stop queen h2 checkmate. Oh, I think I've seen this position before. Queen takes e6 and bishop g6. This is a nice Boden's mate idea. This is about the same thing, no? Bishop g6? I mean, this fork is annoying, but it doesn't matter if I can threaten checkmate. So bishop g6, he gets my queen, I get checkmate. If he takes my bishop, I take with the queen and still deliver. Those are bad arrows. Still deliver mate. So I think we have this and that. This one's bishop b5. I think I've seen this one in the past. Nice little interference idea. Cut off the connection of the two pieces. If pawn takes, I get the mate. And then if queen takes b5, yeah, we just take the queen there. Get the mate. This looks like rook d8 check. Fortunately, I have the pawn here, so I have no back rank of my own to worry about. Check. If rook takes, get the queen. If bishop blocks, I think I take the knight on f6 at least. Yeah, that's what it is. Once you do a lot of tactics, you just see these immediately. So that's where the pattern recognition is being built up from. Let's see. Check, bishop blocks. What do I do if bishop blocks? I can take the knight, but then he gets my knight. So... But then maybe there's still bishop a3 going after the pinned piece, or bishop takes e5. I think that this... Yeah, so I have the feeling there... I can take here... But then he takes the rook, takes the knight, bishop here, c5. If I trade the queens, he still hits the knight. What am I missing here? If I take the rook, he gets my queen, which is not great. So take the knight, take... Maybe I don't even need to take the rook. Can I go bishop takes e5 and I think mate on h8's unavoidable? I think I take the knight, and then I eventually play like bishop takes e5 and he can't stop mate. I think that's the idea. Okay, it stops the puzzle here. I'm a little bit curious real quick. What does it say? If rook takes d8, what does it say to do? Yeah, it says bishop takes e5. Okay, and then mate. It says mate's unavoidable, pretty much. And if queen takes b5, you do the same thing. Yeah, okay, just checking. Alright, continuing along. Looks like a very bad Caro-Kann gone wrong. I don't know how the bishop ended up on the h7 square. Probably something like this at a bad time. But yeah, here it's knight takes f7, queen takes e6, queen f7 mate. Looks like the idea. We get the win. If I take the rook, rook takes back. g7's defended. But I have bishop takes f6, right? If he takes my bishop, then I get his rook. Man, these arrows are bad. Bishop takes here, rook takes, take d7. And if he takes on e7, then I take with the bishop. So let's do this. Let's see, GM Vidit's advice to start with easy tactics every day. Yeah, you want to start with easy stuff just to kind of get you warmed up and get that pattern recognition going, and then you can eventually, branch into more complicated calculation exercises, you could call them. Take the knight, then king f5, check. Not every day you make a king move and make a check with the king move. So what is that, like king f5 plus? kf5 check? And then you take the rook. Yeah, what does that look like? Yeah, kf5 plus, yeah. Alright, chugging along. This knight's pinned, this bishop's undefended. I can take the pawn on h7. I don't know if it matters if I throw in the capture on d5 first. I don't think it matters. You could probably take d5 and then h7, or take h7 right away. I imagine it's taking h7 right away. Then I get this. Let's see what it says here, though, real quick. Here, takes. It says Alekhine was not worried about giving back the pawn since he gets a strong center. If he was worried, he could have started with pawn takes d5, which is equally strong. Okay, so pawn takes d5 would have also worked in the starting position. Okay. What to do here? Feels like one of these knight f6 check, pawn takes, bishop takes, and then there's just really no way to stop the queen from sliding into h6 and g7. Check, take, bishop takes. Can he stop queen h6? Can he guard g7? He can go knight d8, queen h6, knight e6, but then I have bishop takes knight. So I think that this works. Check, here. Yeah, if knight d8, queen h6, knight e6, I take the knight on e6, and then the mate's unstoppable. If I take the knight, the queen takes. I can check on h6, though. Pawn takes, bishop takes, threaten the queen, threaten some check on the g file, and that looks like game over. And if he doesn't take the knight and moves the king, then knight takes f7, forks the king and the queen. So check, take, and yeah, queen is hit, and checking on the g file, g3 or g4 are both there. This is what is it called? Anastasia's mate kind of pattern. Knight check on g6, followed by rook h4 checkmate. Game over. Oh, I had this type of tactic happen against me in an over-the-board tournament recently. Queen takes h2 is a nice one. King takes, check with the knight on g4, and then pick up the queen. Am I playing any Florida tournaments? I live in Ohio, so probably not anytime soon. I did come back to Florida to play something maybe a year or two ago, but yeah, not any Florida tournaments anytime soon, I imagine. Maybe I'll come for a Southern Open one day again or something in the future, but would have to make a bit of a trek down the country. What do we do here? I think I have bishop takes pawn and then check on g6, right? If the queen blocks, I take the queen. If the king moves, I take the rook. So I think it's all about just trying to get the king away from the rook here. Blast open the front door, give the check, and then you take the rook on f1. Here it looks like we take the knight and then check on e4. Don't want to check right away because then the knight takes, but we eliminate the knight, then check, then take. Up a piece. Actually, sorry, we're not up a piece. We were down a piece. Now we are ahead a pawn. With a much better pawn structure, safer king, all of that stuff's good for us. This is another give up the queen for a knight and make a fork kind of thing. Check, check, take. Black does get to take the knight, but then we're up a pawn in the king and pawn endgame, and I think that should be pretty easily winning. It looks like after king f1 or f3, white, it says white's winning here. All right, what to do here? This is protected. I mean, that's protected. I have knight. I have this though, right? Knight takes pawn. My arrows are terrible. Take, and then pin. I think that's the idea. Now he doesn't have to take the knight, of course, but what would he play? Maybe like f3 or something. Maybe then I have some kind of bishop takes a knight followed by retreating the knight. I mean, this has got to be good. Let's put it that way. Yeah, okay. So if he takes, this is bad. How about you, Ernesto? Have you been playing tournaments, or what have you been up to? Looks like a rook takes d3, bishop c4 thing here. Remove the defender of the pawn. Now, does it matter which one we do first? Probably not. I guess I'll take with the rook first just to trade more stuff. And then, yeah, we have a winning king and pawn in game once once the king goes to e2, we'll eventually take the rook and then be up a pawn. Alright, what do we do here? White's threatening maybe rook takes g6. I guess we have queen g7 later, though. That's not really an issue. I can take g2. Rook takes g2, queen h3 looks pretty good. And then if the rook blocks or the king moves, either way I take the rook because I have the a2 rook helping out, so I think this is the way to go here. It doesn't matter. I mean, I can take with the rook or the queen. They're both checkmate. Oh, that's good to hear that your students are doing well. Been teaching, haven't played classical in years. Do you still keep up with, it was you and, was it Eric? Was that his name? I feel like it's been so long since I've, seen you or him or any really a whole lot of people in the Florida scene. But I remember you guys were always you guys went to tournaments together or something like that. As far as I remember, I would see you guys around the same tournaments a bunch. All right, all good. Cool, cool. Oh, that's cool. Still tight with him. Good to hear. I think we take G2, rook blocks, take that rook, and then skewer on the second rank. Check, check, check. Take. Get the win. Bestie, bro. Good to hear. Are you still making music? Because I remember you're making like rap songs in the past. I remember playing having your what was you had an album, right? Was it something with like bombs or something like that? Am I thinking of the right one? I remember listening to that a bunch when I was in college. What do we do here? I think it's rook takes b2 on this one because the rook is kind of overworked. And then we're up a pawn. Our rook is hit, but this is one of those get rid of the knight, make a fork situations. Pick up a pawn. This is knight takes pawn followed by some back rank stuff. Yeah, if you got any newer stuff, you can send it my way for sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to hear it. Knight takes, check is mate on the back rank, but knight takes, rook takes. I guess you do bishop takes. If the rook takes, you still have mate on e1 back there, and if the knight takes, you still have the same thing. So yeah, I think you do it this way. And then yeah, back rank. Let's keep going. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop g5, bishop g5 check, hitting the king and the knight looks pretty good. Our pieces are just so much more active than black's. It really feels like, you know, even without knowing this was a tactic, it feels like there should be a tactic. So take this. Okay, I didn't think about this one. So we need to save both of these. Knight d3, I guess, gets the job done. I think that works. I'm not super enthusiastic about my bishop getting traded off, but I am already up a pawn, so I think that's hard to complain about. This is some knight f3 check queen d2 thing. If I do it the other move order, it's bad because the pawn's not pinned anymore, but I can check first and then take the rook. Message on IG. I'm not on IG anymore, man. So probably you should just hit me up on like chess.com or something. Probably easier. All right. Have a good rest of the day, man. Okay. Looks like we take the pawn and then fork on e6. That looks to be at least picking up one pawn. Then we take the knight. Good to go. All right, sounds good. Yep, have a good day. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, I'm on Lee Chess as well. Same username as chess.com. All right, what to do on this one? Probably I take the knight and then start pushing the b pawn. And because you can't stop b2, the pawn is going to eventually get to b1. I guess white can check on a7, but after king c6, I stop the rook from getting behind the pawn. So let's eliminate that guy. Push this. And then, yeah, if white checks, I think we just need to cover the b7 square. So check, and then king c6 looks good. And then there's no more checks there. Rook a6 I can take with the bishop. This check would be nice if this rook wasn't existing. So we eliminate that. I do have the pawn on g6 covered, so thankfully there's no counterplay. Take that, check, take. Next. If this bishop wasn't here on e7, I would have the ability to push the pawn, so I think I take, check, take the rook, and we are ahead the material. This looks like bishop takes pawn, followed by a back rank check. It's not checkmate, because white can block with the bishop, but then after I take it and move the rook to safety, I am just up a pawn, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 7. I would be up a pawn. Could be a little bit dicey with the dark squares being kind of weakened, but I should be able to block with my queen. I think that that works, right? Take this, check, check, go right back, and then yeah, we're just up a pawn. What do we do here? Some kind of knight takes c3, queen a2 combination. I guess you have to take on c3 first, right? Because if you take on a2, then the rook takes. You kind of run out of steam because the queen covers c3 once the rook is gone. So I think you take here first. If the rook takes, you have queen a2 mate. And instead, if the queens get traded, I take back with the rook, and I'm threatening the rook, the a2 pawn, and b1 square, and I'm up a pawn at the very least there, right? So I take here, take there, and yeah, black is better. The rook is hit on d1. Probably he has to play rook to c1, and then I can probably just move the knight back to safety or something. Yeah, this is good for black. Also, once I move the knight, the e3 pawn is hanging. Let's see here. Can I get rid of the guy that's protecting this rook? I have rook takes e3. I also have knight f4. Those both look pretty good, I will say. What's wrong with knight f4? Rook takes e3, pawn takes take is a piece. Rook takes e3, queen takes bishop f4, pins the queen. Rook takes e3, is there knight d5, I take the rook as well. Oh, wait, knight f4, he has queen f5, right? Queen f5 covers the rook and it saves the queen. Okay, so I think we have to do it this way. Take this, pin that, and win the queen. Let's see. Take, check, king moves, not much there. This is protected. What else to do? Bishop d3, he takes my rook and then my bishop, and that's bad. This is protecting this. So bishop e4, pinning the bishop. And if he takes my rook, I guess I take back, and then I don't really see a great way for white to stop me from promoting. So I think that's the answer. Bishop e4. Okay, if he takes there, I get the rook, and then I'm not ahead material necessarily, but I am going to take one of these two pawns once the king moves, and then the e pawn is going to be very dangerous for white. Okay, feels like some back rank issues. So can I take the pawn and then try to get control of the back rank? I think that that should work. I take the pawn, and I'm not really ahead material because I'm down a pawn to start off with, but I am hitting the queen, I am hitting the b7 pawn. I think that that should work here. So take this. Yeah, so it looks like this works. Alright, closing in on puzzle number 100 in a little bit. Here we have a knight takes pawn, opening up a discovered attack towards the bishop tactic, but we're also attacking the queen simultaneously. Knight takes. Now, we are up a piece, right? We are ahead a piece right now, but I think we're going to lose we're going to lose the g4 bishop as far as I can tell. So I'm leaning towards it being, yeah, I think it's this knight takes d5, queen takes e5. We're not ahead a piece once black takes on g4, but we are going to be ahead one pawn. And we're going to have a much better pawn structure, because the black has a bunch of isolated pawns, and our bishop is also pretty nice. Feels like I take the rook and then fork on f2. Looks to be the way to go on this one. Take that. think I can take the bishop followed by forking on c5. King has to take the queen, and then yeah, I fork, and I'm going to be ahead a piece. Looks good. Check on h1, king here, queen f3 check, king here, bishop f4. For some reason that doesn't feel super convincing. Maybe he takes, runs the king eventually to c2 and b1 or c1. The alternative is to take the bishop right away, or take the h3 pawn. But I think if I take the bishop right away, pawn takes, I do have g2 check, and then knight f3 or bishop g3. Yeah, that should be it. So we get rid of the bishop, check. I don't think it matters which one, they're both checkmate. Okay, it shows knight f3 being mate, but bishop g3 would have also been mate. This is a deflection one, right? Rook d8 check, king takes, knight f7. Nice little royal family fork there. And then I take the queen after the king moves. Now, he doesn't have to take the rook, but even if he plays king e7, I take the rook on h8. I guess he can get the knight on g5, but we are up the exchange there. Should be good. Check, take, and it looks like the game finished with queen to d2, queen to d8, checkmate is the thread, and black is in big trouble here. All right. Mikhail Tal, one of my favorite players of all time, especially historic players, that's for sure. Feels like there's some back rank issues, maybe. I think I can take the knight, check on e8, and then mate on h8. Looks to be the idea here. Check. Checkmate. We are 101 puzzles through. How many are in this chapter? I think I said earlier there was 224 in this chapter, so we're about halfway through on this chapter alone. I was kind of hoping to maybe knock out the chapter in the first, the easy chapter, you know, the easy chapter in the first day of doing this. That would put us, you know, 224 puzzles into the 1,128. That was kind of the plan. We'll see though. Okay, so I take the pawn, king moves, check on g2. White takes everything on g2, but then I have the move knight to e3, forking the rook and the king. Is this ChessBase? No, this is the website chessable.com. I don't know if I can fix the screen share, but yeah, Chessable, ChessAble.com. It's a site that's really good for, well, I mean, improving at chess in general, but there's a bunch of different courses and books on the website. This is the Woodpecker method book, the first book, and they have it on the course, or they have it on the website as a course. So rather than reading from pages, I'm able to make the moves on the board and stuff like that, which is pretty helpful. So yeah, I think we take here. I don't think it matters which rook we use. Is this free on Chessable? This particular course is not free. I believe it's probably priced at, my guess is like 35 bucks. It might be on sale. Chessable does tend to put a lot of their courses on sale. I'm not sure if it is on sale right now or not, but it's not free, unfortunately. It's got 1,128 puzzles though, so you're definitely getting a lot of bang for your buck. It's not a it's not a small course. You have a lot of material to go through if you get the course. It's not my course either, so I'm not really shilling it for any selfish purposes or anything. You have the book on PDF format, but it's not practical without a board. Yeah, books can be a little bit tricky. I do like books myself quite a lot, but in terms of, you know, if you have to set the position up on the board, it takes time to do that, and then you have to have a board, and, you know, I do like the course format. Can you solve the next puzzle? Sure, let's let you give it a go. Mikhail Tal versus Nino Kirov from the year 1974. White to play here. think I have to wait a little bit because there's a little slight delay between what's shown on the screen and what I'm reading in the chat, but yeah, I can give you the chance to solve the next one if you'd like. So I think I've got the answer here, but yeah, let's see what you're thinking about it here, Fanny. You're looking in the right direction, Indium. Let's see if you have a follow-up. If the king does take the pawn, what's the follow-up there? Or if the king does take the bishop, sorry. What's the follow-up? And there's some other problems with black's position that we can take advantage of. Queen h5 fork. So essentially on this one here, there's two different moves that I would be thinking about. I would first recognize this bishop is undefended. This pawn is attacked one time and defended one time. It does end up that there is the move queen h5 available to attack both things simultaneously, but it's also important to think about, is there a way for the opponent to defend against both things at the same time? And it does end up, if we go queen h5, I think that black can put the knight on f5, and that kind of blocks off the two diagonals. However, we don't necessarily give up on the idea of queen h5, we just have to adjust and change the move order. So I think we take the pawn first, then queen h5, and then once the king moves, or once they deal with the check, then we take the bishop. So I think you just have to get the precise move order on this one, and then white's up a pawn with a good position. Yeah, it even points out here, queen h5, knight f5, g4. It says this does not win a piece. It actually loses after rook to h6, apparently. And once the queen moves away, there's like knight g3 check, and this is actually very, very bad for white. So yeah, have to get your move orders correct, and then white wins the pawn and gets the job done. Yep, looks like you guys got it. Very nice. Okay, feels like we should just be taking the bishop on g7 here. King moves away, but then our rook is kind of stuck. What do we do there? I mean, we can play rook a7. We are down an entire rook, though, and if black gets a free move, we're going to be in a little bit of a tricky spot. If I take with the rook, there is rook to g8. Oh, there's not. Well, actually, was there? It almost works to take with the rook and then take the pawn and check on f8, but I think the king will kind of zigzag away. I'm leaning towards bishop takes bishop, king moves. I think bishop h8. I feel like I might have seen this one a long time ago, and I'm getting some vague recollection that bishop h8 is the idea. Because you open up the threat of queen takes h7 checkmate. If the king takes the bishop, you get the mate. If the king takes the rook, you take on f6 and go to g7. This one's tricky. This bishop h8 move is a tricky one. But yeah, you're kind of just... It's almost the case where the bishop is really just in the way. You want the bishop to be out of the way, and going to h8 is the way of doing that. Okay, black to play here. I think it's rook takes knight and then pawn to d3 for the fork is my assumption. I think if we go fork right away, the queen takes. So I think we do it this way. Take, fork. And then if they take the rook, we take theirs with discovered check, and then we can promote our pawn. And yeah, once white deals with the check, we promote the c-pawn to a queen. I think rook takes pawn and queen a1 check, hitting the king as well as the rook on c3. I think we're netting at least a pawn. Probably will also win a second pawn because b4 and d4 are weak. So I think we do it this way. Check, take, and that's that. This looks like another one of these like Caro-Kann type positions, I think we take the pawn, check on e6, and then mate on f7. If the king went to g6, I guess h5 is mate. Or queen f7. Yeah, actually queen f7 is mate in both cases. So this is a pretty common pattern. You have a case where a rook is protecting a queen, but the rook is also protecting the back rank at the same time. And so I think we have rook e1 check. If the rook takes, I get the queen. And if the king moves or the bishop blocks, then I can trade the queens and pick up the rook on the a1 square. So check, trade queens, take the rook. How do I see these tactics without thinking that much? So this is kind of, I will say, the main point of this particular book or course. This is the Woodpecker method. The idea is that the more puzzles and patterns you've seen over the years, the more, let's say, like pattern recognition you can draw upon, and the less you have to think in these types of positions because you've kind of seen similar ideas before. Also, at the same time, again, from just, I've been playing chess for like 21 years at this point, right? And at a, at a Master Plus level for at least like half of that time or close to it. So over the years, I've just kind of built up the ability to look for all of the forcing moves in the position and calculate pretty quickly. That doesn't mean I see every single tactic quickly. I mean, some of these puzzles here have taken me a little bit longer than others. But this first chapter of the course, this is the easy exercises chapter. These are going to be on the relatively straightforward side of things. They'll get progressively more difficult as the course goes along. But this first chapter is supposed to be ones that are that you can solve pretty quickly, especially if you have built up this pattern recognition over time. It is not something you're going to be able to do quickly without having built up this skill, but it is a skill. It is something that you can improve at over time. It just takes a lot of training and practice is what it comes down to. Do I have a title? I'm a FIDE master. FIDE master working towards the international master title. Okay, yeah, I mean, you're early on in your journey, so absolutely understandable. But it's a good book. It's good to solve a bunch of puzzles. It's good to solve a bunch of exercises. The more you do it, the more second nature it becomes, and the more it kind of sticks in your subconscious, you could say. And that's kind of a big part of being good at tactics and calculation, is having a lot of patterns kind of built up over time. So here we can take this pawn, and then the bishop is undefended. So there's this kind of lineup here, and I need to clear out the knight and the pawn, so I could do it this way, and then I win a pawn. What's the difference between doing the Woodpecker method and just grinding puzzles in Lichess? So it's a very good question. The way that I think about it. Now, first of all, I will say this is like my first day of doing the actual Woodpecker method, so I'm not a... I know from other people's stories and experiences, and I've read some of the science of spaced repetition, but I haven't actually done the full-blown Woodpecker method, let's say, training technique myself, quite honestly. But the idea is that when you solve a bunch of, let's say, easier exercises, or exercises that are not super difficult and super long-winded, like these aren't 5, 6, 7 move calculation sequences with a bunch of tricky moves necessarily. When you solve a bunch of easier exercises, it's building up this, again, pattern recognition. I would say the difference, though, when you're doing like puzzles on Lichess or chess.com, especially if we're talking about, like, let's say rated puzzles. If you're doing rated puzzles, those puzzles will usually be at your kind of close to your maximum difficulty level. Like, let's say you're rated, I don't know, 2,000 in puzzles on chess.com or Lichess. When you do rated puzzles, it's going to give you something around the 2,000 range, like maybe 1,900, maybe 2,100, something like that. And those puzzles are going to be quite difficult for your particular skill level, because they're kind of around your rating, your puzzle rating level. What those would be good for is kind of the more difficult, at least, relatively speaking, that would be kind of good for like the more difficult calculation puzzles, because if they were easy, you would be a higher rated you'd have a higher puzzle rating. The downside of that if that's all you do, is that you're only focusing on like the in-depth calculation and not building up that pattern recognition. Whereas if you kind of do, I think a good thing to do is ultimately like a mixture of the two. You want to have the pattern recognition built up, so that's where you solve a bunch of easier puzzles in a short amount of time, which is kind of what I'm trying to do with this course. Progressively shorten the amount of time. And then if you're wanting to improve, let's say you're like high level ceiling of tactical ability, then that's where you would want to do like rated puzzles on chess.com or Lichess, like kind of tougher calculation exercises. But you do want to build up the pattern recognition in the first place for sure. Okay, on this one I think it's bishop takes c4, but I could be wrong. It could also be rook takes e6, and then some kind of queen f6 move. You think it's better when I'm live at TikTok? Depends on if I want, I don't know if the people who would watch on TikTok are who I'm looking for. I'm thinking bishop takes c4, and then if they take, you check on e8. But I could also imagine that taking the bishop is good, but I'm leaning towards the capture. Okay, yeah, this ends up being the way to go. And then you get the checkmate. Yeah, you're very welcome. I think you have bishop takes pawn and then rook to g6 on this one, because then you pin the queen. If they don't take the bishop, then you're just up a pawn. That looks good. I can check on a couple of different squares. Nothing really to capture. I could play pawn to d4. I could check and then play pawn to d4. If I can go d4, they take and then pin the rook. Feels like a bunch of moves are pretty good on this one. Oh, you were also looking at bishop takes c4 and rook e8 check? Yeah, that was what I went for. There are a lot of chess streamers at TikTok, sir. If you're teaching like this, they'll join and send gifts. Okay, this is my first day doing it on YouTube, so we'll see how things go. I'll consider adjusting things in the future. I guess if I check, the queen can block, right? So I think I need to push the pawn first, and then I don't know if this matters. If I go here, I can block with the rook. If I go here, again, I can block with the rook. So I don't think it matters which square I go to here. Okay, it says alternative, find another move. Okay, queen to b6 ends up being the way to go. Okay, what to do here? If I move this knight, we open up a discovered attack on the rook, but if I move the knight, they're going to take my rook on c2. Do I have a schedule for streaming? The plan is to stream each weekday at 10 a.m. for the next maybe month or so. So like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, so in my time zone. And probably stream for maybe 2 to 3 hours each day. I do have other things I do in the afternoon, so I'm not going to be on like all day long or anything. I have other students to teach and stuff. But that's the game plan. Try to do as much of the course as I can each day and progressively go through the multiple cycles, eventually do the entire course in one day. Probably when I do the entire course in one day, I'm like barely going to talk because I'll have to solve 1,000+ puzzles in one day, but we'll see how it goes. I think I take the pawn here, give a check, and take the rook. Looks to be good. Here, first instinct is that something like this is looking good. I'm not sure if it matters which knight I take with first, though, does it? Probably doesn't matter. Will I continue the speedrun series, maybe with a different opening? Yeah, I'm going to definitely continue doing more speedruns. I was thinking that the next speedrun series I do is probably going to be... I was thinking about almost like an opening roulette way of doing things, like kind of just do a different opening every game. You know, maybe there would be a set of openings I would play, like the Carol-Con, you know, maybe some Sicilian, mix in some French, you know, kind of a certain set of openings that I would kind of cycle between in the next speedrun. rather than just having every episode focus on one opening. I was thinking about that, but not 100% sure yet. I think I take the pawn, but I don't know which knight to take with. I think I'm gonna do this one. Okay, it says alternative. I guess it's this one instead. Then this. Okay, and this ends up working. If the knight goes to d8 to protect, then I can take the rook on a8. And the knight on e6 is pinned. I think I've seen this one before. I think it's queen g8 check, king takes, bishop e6, and then rook to g8. I think I've seen this tactic. Probably in some other book or something like that. You hate playing against the Binko as a d4, c4 player? That's part of why I like the opening so much. Unfortunately for the Binko Gambit speedrun specifically, there just haven't been very many people that have played d4 on move 1. It's been much easier to do the French defense speedrun and the Ready Nimzo Larsen speedrun compared to the Binko speedrun, because I try to play against players, you know, in these rating ranges, and there's just not many people playing d4. And if they don't play d4, I can't really try to play a Binko Gambit, so that's kind of unfortunate. Here I think I check with the queen, and then pull the king into a fork, and then take the queen. Check. Check. Takes. This is also a pretty famous example. Petrosian versus Spassky. Alright. I think rook takes pawn, and knight f6 is checkmate. I think rook check, and then knight f2 is checkmate. Similar, kind of similar patterns there, back to back a little bit. This is almost mate, because if he takes the knight h3 or f3 is mate. This bishop is preventing that idea. I think I eliminate the bishop, take the pawn, and then I don't think it matters which one. I mean, they're both checkmate, so f3, h3, they both get the job done. If this queen was gone, I could play queen f7 check and then queen f8 for a back rank, so I think I take the pawn. I could also go to well, if I go to d6 and they take, they cover f8, so I think I take the pawn, check, check, checkmate. For some reason, e4 is more common now, even if d4, a lot of players at lower level go to London. That's what I was expecting. I was expecting a fair amount of d4 games and then playing against the London system a bunch of times, but for whatever reason, there wasn't even really that many London players on this, you know, when I was doing the speedrun. Maybe if I tried again, there would be more d4 players, but yeah, I found it kind of odd that it was like a very, very big difference. Like, I could get the French defense speedrun games in very easily because everybody played e4. And then I remember one night I was playing for like 3 hours waiting for somebody to play d4. And just like nobody played d4. And I can't really do anything about it if they don't play d4. I can't really make a Binko speedrun. So I'm gonna probably revisit the Binko speedrun, or at least try again, but it's been pretty tough to even get d4 games, unfortunately. This one I think is d3. You hit the bishops, and then if they take your bishop on g7, you take theirs on e2, and you hit both rooks. So kind of an in-between intermezzo idea. Yeah, even says intermediate move that wins the piece. Rook f1 check, and then queen e1 is mate. That rook was just in the way. I needed to get the rook out of the way. I've seen this pattern before. Bishop a6 to pin the bishop, and if the bishop takes, you have queen a8 checkmate. Now, black can play pawn to c6 to stop that, but pretty much if we don't play bishop a6, I think we're just losing our rook. So I think you kind of have to do this. Okay, if he takes, it's mate. c6 is definitely a better move, but white can trade, and then white's just up the bishop on c1. So we're just up a piece. This looks like knight takes pawn and rook b6 check. And I think we pick up at least one pawn. Check, take. Maybe it's more like a coincidence because I do face a lot of d4 in London at my level, but e4 is still more common. Yeah, it could just be a coincidence. For whatever reason, it just, you know, it just happened that a bunch of people were not playing d4. And yeah, I assume it's more of a coincidence, because I figure the London system is popular enough that people should be playing d4. But anyways, I'll have to revisit that particular speedrun series at some point. So I would love to take the knight, but my rook is hanging, right? So I need to do something with the rook so that I can take the knight. And I think I can kamikaze the rook on f8, take the bishop, and then I take the knight here. If I play it again, I hope you explain in more detail what white should do against it. So you want me to give the secrets of how to play against the Binko Gambit? No, I understand. Yeah, I try to be pretty fair about both sides of the board. I try to talk about the mistakes that my opponent makes and what they could have done differently and better. In my opinion, playing against the Binko Gambit, the best way to do things in my experience, so you take b5, you take a6, and then I find the e3 setups, like where white plays at very early e3, even before black takes the pawn on a6, I find those to be kind of the most annoying for black, in my opinion. But ultimately, the opening is supposed to be a little bit better for white because they do start off ahead of pawn, but there's always kind of little practical tricks that white has to be careful about. It's kind of like the King's Indian defense, which computers say is not very good for black, but a lot of players playing white don't play like a computer. They don't play super, like, the most precise moves, and they mess up and lose the game, which is why the King's Indian defense is still a very good opening. So if my knight was, or if my queen was out of the way, I'd have a fork. So I need to take this knight, make this fork, take this, and we do get the piece. This one almost reminds me of the Magnus Carlsen Sergei Karyakin game. Is I think queen h6 and rook h1. Could you go rook h1 first though? I don't think you can change the move order. Maybe you can. Maybe queen h6 still works there. I think queen h6 is quicker though, for sure. It's a two-move checkmate. Exactly, LOL as a d4 player. I hate playing against both Binko and Budapest. Feels like black just gets a lot of play. Yeah, that's part of why I like the opening from black's perspective. You're down a pawn. You have a lot of open files on the queen side, though. You have a lot of play. I've played the Binko Gambit for like probably over 10 years at this point. It's one of my favorite openings for sure. It does get progressively trickier and trickier to play the higher rated your opponents are. So like playing it against grandmasters is definitely a bit tougher. But it's very much one of my favorite openings of all time for sure. So here I think you take the rook. Then you check on g2. The king tries to run to f1 eventually, and you have bishop to b5. Oops. You have bishop to b5 to eventually hit the king. The king eventually ends up on e1, and then you can play rook g1 checkmate. I think that's the idea here. Check, 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 check. Eventually we kick the king, and then either one of these work. You get the checkmate. The check doesn't do anything. The capture doesn't seem to be the way to go. Pawn f5, bishop takes, rook e7, kicking the queen from protecting the bishop looks pretty good. Yeah, it's annoying at quite a lot of levels. Unfortunately, grandmasters are tough nuts to crack that I play against, relatively regularly. But yeah, at pretty much every other level, I think it's a very, very good opening. It's very fun to play too. All right, I can take the rook, but then I get checkmated, which is bad news. I can take the pawn, rook takes, check, king moves, and then take the rook on g6. Or if the rook blocks, I take the rook on g6. Now, if the king moves away and black doesn't take the bishop, then I can take the rook with check. That's the important point. So I think I do it this way. Check, check, checkmate. f7 would have also won too. These are kind of the three pieces that I'm eyeing. If I take the knight, they take back, the bishop's defended. But I think I can take the bishop, then the knight, and then the pawn's pinned. I think I do it that move order. Take, 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 and we have two pieces versus a rook, which is pretty good. There's no way black is winning this, right? I don't think black is going to give mate. So is this a draw that I'm going for? check on d2, king h5, or queen f4. The king has way too many squares to do some kind of mate. So I think I actually have queen takes h6, king takes, and then that's a stalemate. I think we saw one puzzle much earlier on in the chapter that was like a white to play and draw kind of thing. Here it's a black to play and draw as far as I'm aware. Yeah, so this would be stalemate. He doesn't have to take the queen, but then the fact that we eliminated one pawn makes it much, much more difficult for white to win. Alright, what to do here? This fork looks good if the pawn was gone, so maybe I just take the pawn. And then I'm threatening the fork. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, we get the fork. So is this now? I think we've transitioned over into a Bobby Fischer or Robert Fischer sequence. Tactics flow from a superior position. Very good quote, I will say. Very important to recognize that, yeah, you have to have a good position. The better your position is, the more likely there is to be a tactic for sure. So no back rank stuff here. If I take on c3 and check, the king can eventually run out to the h6 square. But I think I can check first with the rook, then take on c3, and then I think we're mating because the king is trapped. So I think we do it this way. Check, check, and then, yeah, you want to take the queen, of course. Take the pawn, rook takes, check on d4, then take on b4. I think I'm getting a pawn, knight, and bishop for my one rook, which sounds pretty good. Oh, okay. I had not thought about knight to e6, so now it's time to reconsider a little bit. I take here, he takes that. But then I have knight e2 check, right? Knight e2, king moves, and I take the rook. So I think I take the rook. Then I trade rooks. Seems simple enough. And then once the knight takes, we have rook to d4. Knight takes, and then rook d4 forks the pieces. Thank you for streaming this. I had heard this book was really advanced, so I stayed away, but these seem surprisingly doable. How are you finding the puzzles? So this first chapter is just the easy puzzles. So so far they've been relatively easy. There is a couple of intermediate chapters, and then there is one final advanced chapter. We'll see how they progress. What I would say is that if these puzzles seem doable, at the very least, you could always go through the easy chapter, and then you can kind of start working into the intermediate chapter. I don't know how difficult those are going to be until I get into it. But yeah, so far the easy chapter is pretty straightforward, depending on your on your skill level. But you don't necessarily have to do the entire book. You could always do the easy chapter, let's do some of the intermediate chapters, and then if you find the advanced or hard chapter too difficult, you kind of hold off on that one for the future. That's another way of working through it, I guess. All right, this guy's undefended. There's this lineup. My bishop's in the way. Bishop takes pawn with a check, discovered attack, and we win the queen. Something I don't know if anybody had ever told me this or explained this to me in the past, but I heard about this in a seminar when I was going for my FIDE trainer license. There was a seminar that a grandmaster gave, and he pretty much explained that every tactic in chess is uses a combination of three pieces, or three, let's say, units, two of your pieces and one of the opponent's. Two of the opponent's pieces and one of yours, like that kind of thing. And it's like the more and more tactics I do, the more and more that gets reinforced. I mean, this is a three-piece lineup. If you think about a pin is also a three-piece lineup. If you're pinning something, there's the piece that's doing the pin, the piece that's in the middle being pinned, and then the piece that's at the end of the pin. If you do a fork, it is your piece attacking two things at the same time, so you and two other pieces is three pieces. If you're doing a discovered check like this, or a discovered attack like this, again, three-piece lineup, and that's the way that things are working. If you're doing a skewer, it's also three pieces, because it's your piece doing the skewer, the stronger piece in the middle, and the weaker piece behind. if you're doing a remove the defender tactic, you are using something to capture something that's protecting a third thing. So kind of interesting to think about that. I never really heard it explained that way. I don't think you necessarily have to think of it that way, but once I heard that explanation, it made a lot of sense. Like even here, like right now, this is kind of the combination. If I eliminate the rook, then I can make the fork and take the queen. I guess this one's kind of like 4 pieces. You know, technically it's 3 pieces, but it's kind of 4 squares, like a 4-square combination, right? E2, making the fork, and then get rid of the rook. And if more pieces are involved, it's a sequence of 3 move combinations. Yeah, it like ultimately every, let's say, longer combination in chess, like when you see like the super fancy like 5, 6, 7 move combinations, it's usually a combination, right? That's where the word comes from. It's a kind of grouping of smaller tactics put together. That's kind of how they work. So here, this on its own would be a normal fork, but because I'm eliminating the rook, it's now turned into a little bit of a combination because I'm not just making the fork, but I'm also including a removing the defender idea. I remove the rook and then make the fork. That's why this would be kind of considered. It's a relatively short combination, but a combination nonetheless. Because I'm not just making a fork. I'm doing something and then incorporating the fork. Okay, queen is hit. I need to find what to do. I think this is one where I actually ignore the threat on the queen. I think I take the bishop. If they take my queen, I have pawn to f6, and then rook h8's unstoppable. That's a pretty nice idea. Because I don't think I need to defend against this threat. Also, I will note, if I move the queen, there's bishop takes c3. Like queen h3, there's bishop or rook takes c3, which doesn't look great. So I think I can actually ignore black's idea. Then I lock the bishop in place, and then I get the checkmate. This is a really nice one. This is something that I think separates, let's say, like lower level players from higher level players. Like one of the bigger distinctions, in my opinion, from all my like experience coaching and looking at players' games. Many players at the lower levels, the opponent makes a threat, and their first instinct is a defensive move. Like, oh, they attacked my queen, right? My queen is being hit right now. I need to do something about the queen. I need to save the queen. Move the queen away, take the pawn, like that kind of stuff. Whereas a stronger player will think, okay, I see the threat, I see the idea, but can I make a bigger threat or bigger forcing move of my own? Can I do something to kind of one-up the opponent? Rather than playing a defensive move. Like, the stronger a player is, the more they recognize that defense is like a last resort, if you can avoid it. You really only want to play a purely defensive move if you have to. And I think this is a position that shows exactly this. We don't play a defensive move. We ignore what the opponent's doing because we kind of beat them to the punch, which is really nice. So it's all about looking for the relation between the pieces. Ultimately, that's a huge part of tactics. Like, pattern recognition is there to, let's say, pattern recognition is like a shortcut, right? If I've seen a certain pin or a certain tactic or a certain fork skewer, etc., that's essentially just a shortcut. It makes life a lot easier if you're familiar with a lot of patterns in the first place, but you don't necessarily have to know a pattern to execute a tactic. If you're trying to figure out the tactic on your own without knowing the pattern in the first place, then it is very much going to be about, like, where's the lineup of pieces? Like, there's a couple of things aiming in a certain direction. Like right here, this is a 3-piece lineup, right? It's sort of a pin if you look at it from white's point of view, but it's also a discovered attack. If I move my knight out of the way, then I'm attacking the bishop on c4. So the question would be, can I move the knight out of the way, do something dangerous with the knight in this position, so that I can still attack the bishop at the same time? So here I can take the pawn on e3. I was threatening queen takes g2 with the knight on e3 helping out. Now I can take the bishop, and I picked up a pawn. I think black was already ahead a piece in the first place, but you pick up an extra pawn in this position, which is nice. So again, it's like a 3-piece lineup. I think another one here, 3-piece lineup, right? If this knight on e4 was gone, then this knight on d4 would be attacked a bunch. So I can either check right away, or I can take the knight and then check. Because if I take the knight, the rook takes, and then again it's this three-piece lineup. So I'm going to take the knight first, then check. Ooh, queen takes, that's tricky. If I take the queen, they get mine, and I'm down a bishop, so I have to take the rook. I don't want to do this, because I'm down a bishop still, I have to take the rook. And now I'm just up a piece. Or, I guess I'm up the exchange, rook versus bishop. The queen is going to move off of f6. Okay, next one here. So I see another three-piece lineup. I guess it's a pawn on c5 instead of a piece. But, you know, 3-unit lineup. That means that the pawn on c5 is kind of pinned. So b4 is a move worth considering to hit the pawn. But black can play pawn to c4 to kind of deal with that. So I'm going to take the pawn first and then hit the bishop that's pinned. If black goes knight to d7, it looks like we could take that. And then once again, another three-piece lineup. Queen to c2 wins the knight because of the pin. The puzzle stopped after b4, though. Let's see. Very true that what you said about lower players prioritizing defending the opponent's threat rather than thinking about making a bigger threat. Yeah, I've been coaching students for 10 years now, and it's something I see all the time with lower rated players. The stronger a player is, the more that they want to kind of like impose their will on the position. The less they want to react to the opponent, the stronger the player is, the more they want to do their own thing, which I think is a very important mindset to have when you're playing. It's not always going to work to ignore your opponent's ideas and try to one-up them and try to make your own threats. Sometimes you will have to play defense, but more often than not, you'd rather avoid it if you can. Okay, so let's go to the next one. I think I've seen this one before. So if I take on e2, they take me on e7 with check. I think I can play bishop d6 to save the piece first, because I threaten checkmate, and then I can take on e2. There is also the knight that's hanging, but if I take the knight, bishop takes, knight takes, h3... It's actually a little bit hard to guard my bishop and my knight. I think it's bishop d6. Then I take, and then I take the rook. And yeah, black is up the exchange here. I think a lot of beginners have a tendency to start calculating right away rather than looking at themes in the position, like pins and x-rays, number of attackers. You're absolutely correct, JC. It's very important, and this is something I also teach with students, it's very important before you start trying to look for moves or calculate in a position, you want to do what you could kind of call like an orientation of the board, kind of like a big picture approach. Like what's undefended in the position, what is attacked and defended the same number of times in the position, where's some three-piece lineups, where's some pins, where's some discovered attacks, where's some skewers, where's some you know, three-piece lineups, as we're talking about here a bit. Because once you get a big picture approach of the position first, and then you can also kind of expand this to like positional ideas. Where's an isolated pawn? Where's a pawn weakness? Where's an outpost? Open file? Badly placed piece? Weak king? You can kind of extrapolate this a bunch of different ways. But once you get kind of a big picture approach of the position first, then it becomes a lot easier and better to start looking for moves that kind of fit the position, rather than just the first move you're seeing being the one that you're trying to make work. That can work if your first instinct is pretty good, but a lot of people, their first instinct is not necessarily the right way to do things, and they really get stuck on that first instinct. They see like, oh, I want to make this move, and it's just the only move they're thinking about, and there very well may be no way to make that move work, and then they get really stuck on it without looking at other ideas. This is a Fisher game, right? Yeah, I think I've seen this one. I think you take on f6. If the queen takes, there's a fork on h5, and if the king takes, you have a skewer on g5. So again, kind of a combination that leads into a three-piece tactic. Because, yeah, this is now three pieces combined together. But you had to kind of pull the queen into the wrong square to begin with. Alright, queen's hit, rook's hit. We can check on e3. That's terrible arrows. We can check on e3 or d4. the king will move. But then there's some back rank issues, like maybe we can check and then put the queen on f2, or check and then, yeah, king moves and then queen f2, and then white kind of starts having some difficulties with their back rank. I've seen this pattern before, so I don't know if it matters which square we check on, though. If we check on e3 and the rook blocks, we don't want to take the bishop because we get mated. I think we want to check on d4 so that if the rook blocks, we have rook e1 mate, so I think we do it that way. Then queen f2 is a nice one, because white is threatening our rook and our pawn. Queen f2 blocks off the f-file. If they take our rook, we get theirs with mate. If they take our queen, we check on the back rank. And if the rook moves somewhere else, we'll play rook to e1 and probably win on the back rank. Okay. I think you can go knight d3, three-piece tactic. And if the rook takes, then there is a lack of control over the back rank with queen a1 check. Oh, okay, took the pawn. I guess I could just take the rook, though, right? Looks good. Probably for today, I know there's 224 puzzles in this first chapter. Maybe that'll take an extra 45 minutes or so. Probably I'll end up finishing this chapter, or at least getting close to finishing this chapter, and then we'll be back tomorrow. Is my plan for now. Here I think we can take this knight, but then queen to d4 check is losing us material. So I think we take the pawn, and then rook h5 is mate, though, because we have the rook on the g file cutting things off, which is nice. What to do here? Undefended, pin. Two-piece lineup, you could say. I think rook g5, right? Rook g5, if the knight takes the rook, then I take the queen because the knight's pinned. And my knight on f3 protects the rook on g5. So I think that this works. And then, yeah, we're just up material. It looks like d5 would be really good next move, too. Alright, bishop on g4, skewering my two rooks. Not ideal. I have bishop e6 check. Always good to look at checks first. I think the king has to go to f1. And then maybe I have rook takes f4 there, I guess. Feels like the king is going to run into trouble. I think we just have so many pieces around the king here. But let's double check. So check here, check, take, king moves. I guess we have queen f2, right? Queen f2 mate. And if something blocks on f3, we can take on f3. So I think we do it that way. Check, check, check. It's all checks, which is really nice. All right, what to do here? I mean, taking the bishop is the first instinct, but the rook goes to stop the pawn from behind, and I don't really have a great way to protect the pawn. If I check, king moves, then I take the pawn, or then I take the bishop. He goes behind because he needs to stop the pawn from promoting, but then I can zigzag the rook to d8 and promote the pawn and win the rook. So I think it's important to throw in this check, then take here. And then, yeah, you want to get the rook to the d8 square so that you can promote. And the nice thing is that it's going to be checked no matter what. Make the queen, and now we're just up a rook. Was this Karpov? Yeah, this was Karpov. Nice tactic from Karpov. All right. If we look at the things that are attacked and defended equally, both the pawn on e2 and the rook on c1 are both attacked and defended one time. The queen is kind of the commonality between the two. And usually in these cases, you can take one thing and then take the other. So I think we can take the e2 pawn, then the c1 rook, and then we'll take the pawn on c5 afterwards, I guess. Queen f1. I guess black played queen to d2, but you could probably just trade the queens and then take the c5 pawn. And I think that's easily winning for black. Oh, this is a famous one. I'm surprised this is in the easy category, because I don't know if I would say this is easy unless I knew the idea. I think it's knight g3 check. If the queen takes, I take the rook on b1. And if the pawn takes, you actually make a quiet move here with rook a8, and then you want to swing around to h8. The rook a8 to h8 sequence is definitely, like, I think this should be in the intermediate one, quite honestly. The quiet move aspect makes this kind of difficult, in my opinion, unless you've seen the idea before. But this is a pretty famous combination. And there's nothing white can do to stop us from checkmating on the h-file. I think I've seen this one too, maybe. Knight f3 check, pawn takes, rook g6 check, king moves, knight f2 checkmate is a very weird... This almost looks like it would have come from like some kind of in-game study, but it came from a game. I mean, this was Korchnoi versus Karpov. I don't remember how they reached this position. It's very weird looking. Black has no pawns, but this is a nice little checkmate sequence. It is actually important that the king is on f1, because otherwise white could move the king to f1 or something like that to run away. Okay, our queen is hit. If the bishop was gone, this would be checkmate. So we need to get rid of the bishop. But we don't want to use the knight because our own knight's pinned. So I think we take with the queen, and then checkmate. So there is a lineup here. There is a check on b4 or h6 available. Does it matter which one we do? Does it matter which move order we do? We can check on b4, then take the bishop. We can check on h6, then take the bishop. Or we can take the bishop and then check. And if we take, we have, you know, two different checks available once again. If we check on b4, the king goes to g7. If I take with the queen, I lose the e2 bishop. If I take with the rook, he takes on c2, and my own queen is kind of overworked protecting things. So I think I take the bishop first. If I check on b4 afterwards, the queen can block the check. If I check on h6, I can take the queen after. So yeah, I think I do it this way. Take this check, and then here. And then, yeah, bishop b4 check, it says queen c5, black is fine. And it also points out that if we check and then take here, black does have rook takes e2. So we get we won the piece and got the job done. All right, puzzle 155. There's a lineup here, which means this pawn is pinned, which means this bishop is not being protected. In that regard, we have a different lineup, three-piece lineup here. If my knight was gone, then I could take the bishop, and the bishop cannot be captured by the pawn because the pawn's pinned. So I need to move the knight. I have two places I can move the knight to attack the queen, but I also need to anticipate how black is going to respond with each move. If I go knight to b5 and he takes, that's fine. But if I go knight to b5 and he moves the queen to guard the bishop, then that's not as good. So I think I go to d5 because the d5 knight keeps the queen off the e7 square. So we can do this. Okay, if he wants to take the bishop, I'll take the queen. That's obviously good. If he had taken the knight, we take here and then take the rook, and black is also down material here, which is good for us. King, stuck protecting rook, check, pulls the king away from guarding the rook. I think we do this and take the rook. Pretty much the same idea here, actually, which is nice. It's really nice when you get like similar patterns back to back. King is stuck protecting the queen. If we check, we pull the king away from protecting the queen, and then we take the queen. Check, win the queen. You do lose the bishop on e2, but white's ahead enough material that it makes up for it. I feel like I've seen this one before too, maybe. This queen has no safe squares, or at least very few. If the queen goes here, f3 hits it, it kicks it backwards. So here I think you can go knight to d5. And if the pawn takes the knight, you take back with the c4 pawn. The queen is hit. Only safe square is g4 once again, and then after f3, the queen is trapped. If they don't take the knight, you're threatening knight c7. And if the rook moves over, then you also have knight e7. So this knight on d5 is a huge monster. Okay, he didn't stop knight c7, so we can go do that. Take there. And yeah, white's in good shape in this position for sure. Alright, let's keep going. So our rook is hit. Our pawn is hit. Check here, he just takes that. I don't see a follow-up. This is a different capture that's available. Oh, okay. So I think if we take the knight, then we have this quiet move with rook h4, and then rook h8 is unstoppable. Probably I'd put this in the intermediate category. I think anything that involves a quiet move is probably just inherently intermediate, in my opinion, because in my mind, an easy tactic is one where it's like a check or a capture, you know, check, capture, and then just win material. Whereas an intermediate one is kind of like a quiet move type, you know, can involve a quiet move like this. Rook h4 is not really, it's not a check or a capture. It is a big threat that white can't, or that black can't really stop, but I would probably categorize this in the intermediate category. Anyways. Knight is stuck protecting queen. We have a check available here. King can't take because of our knight. If the knight takes, we win the queen. And the king is also stuck protecting the knight. So if we check and the king moves over to in the corner, we can just take the knight. So I think here we win material. Looks good. Our rook is hit. No checks on the king. Three different captures, three or four different captures. Bishop is stuck, is protected by the knight. If we can eliminate the knight, then we can take the bishop. Knight is also pinned, but we can't do something like queen takes f4 because they can take our rook with check first. So I think we eliminate the knight here. And then I think we take the bishop, and if they check on the back rank, we can always block with the knight. Oh, queen take. Hold on. Ah, okay. This was a little sloppy by me. We want to check with the rook first, and then take with check. It is probably pretty important that it comes with a check here, I will say. So we want to check first, then take. What does it say about queen takes f4? It says black is still better here, but it is trickier. It's a trickier situation. Rook a1 is not mate now because the bishop locks with the discovered check, I think, is the trick there. Okay, fair enough. So, little bit rushed here, taking the bishop right away. We want to check with the rook, then take the bishop. We want the capture to come with check, which is definitely more ideal. All right, three-piece lineup. If I check, the king takes, and the queen is protected, though. So if I can get the queen to be unprotected, then I can check and win the queen. I need to get the bishop away from defending the queen. So I think that means that the bishop is not protecting the pawn. I take the pawn, then I check, then I take the queen. Okay, the puzzle continues. Bishop here. My queen's hit, and this check is a problem. I think I need to check on e4. And then I move the queen away somewhere. Now that the rook is blocked, bishop f6 is not mate. I think I can take the pawn. Yeah, it says here there's no good discovered check, and black is winning here at this point. Alright, I think we saw a Capablanca... Get rid of that. I think we saw a Capablanca example that was pretty similar to this. I think we take on h2 and then checkmate on h4. And the bishop on d4 is controlling the g1 square, which is nice. One attacker, one defender. The bishop and the rook are both protecting c1. I think we eliminate the bishop, and then there is less protection of the rook on c1. So I think we do that. Take this, and then we're just up a piece. Taking on f5 doesn't really... If white ever takes on f5 with check, we can always move the king to the back rank. I don't think that changes a whole lot. Alright. Bishop, protected by king, hit by rook. If the bishop was gone, there is a attack. Still going? Yep, still going. I'll probably stop around, I don't know, maybe exercise 200 or something like that. Maybe another 15, 20 minutes. Somewhere in that range. So this bishop is pinned. If the bishop moves, we have a mate. So it's not pinned to a piece, but it's pinned to a square. And so I think we go bishop to b5. And then if the bishop does move, we get the mate. If black blocks with the knight on c6, we can just take the knight at that point. When I try calculation in a game, I tend to calculate it wrong. LMAO, always miss the move I forgot to calculate. Usually it equals blunders by me. So, yeah, you have to be very diligent when calculating. You not only want to look for your best moves as much as you can, but you also have to be looking for your opponent's best moves to the best of your ability. I do think looking for the opponent's best moves is simply put, it is trickier than looking for your own best moves. Mainly because, you know, the orientation of the board, we're looking at it from our side of the board. It's generally a bit harder to look at it from the opponent's perspective, but there are ways to train that. There are ways to get better at that. Yeah, definitely can be tricky if we're not careful. So I would like to make this fork of the king and the bishop, but the pawn on f7 defends it. The pawn on f7 also defends the g6 pawn, so I think I can take this first. Okay, I guess they kamikaze the bishop, but I think if I just take the bishop and then the pawn, I think we're up a pawn. I could probably also do knight takes f7, but I think this way is simple enough. Yeah, we're up a pawn and black has double pawns. It says knight takes f7 is also winning. It also says you can take the pawn on e6, then f4, and that's also winning. Okay. King is stuck protecting the queen. We have a check on f8 to deflect the king away eventually. I think we make the check and then take the queen. Queen versus two minor pieces, very good for us. All right, we have moved on to Garry Kasparov, famous attacking player. I don't see any great checks. We do have this capture. Feels like this is the idea, to kind of bring the king out into the open. But it would probably require some additional calculation. If king goes back to b8, take on b6 with check, bishop blocks, rook down to c7. I think that should mate. I don't think black can guard the bishop there. If the king goes to d7 instead, what do we do? Queen a7 check or queen takes b6? Not 100% sure. So in an actual game, I would take more time to calculate rook takes c7. This is, again, an unfortunate case where, because I know there's a tactic, I have to assume rook takes c7 is the move, but they did also mention earlier that there were some positions that there are not tactics, like a red herring kind of thing. But I mean, it's the first Garry Kasparov tactic. It's got to be rook takes c7. So I'm kind of, I don't know if I'd call it cheating here, but I'm pretty sure this is the first move. I don't actually have the exact follow-up outlined. Oh, actually, maybe it's very good that I didn't rush. I think queen a7 first is very important. We check a7. If the king moves, this will eventually win material, and then if the bishop blocks, we also win material. Yeah, that's actually a good reason as to why I didn't rush. I think queen a7 first. Yeah. Rook c1 is a little bit less decisive, I think, because the king runs away. I can double check that real quick, though. Yeah, rook c1 is actually not winning. Rook c1 check. Check. I thought this would... Oh, rook c7, you get mated. Okay. Yeah, so there's no actual mate. You have to go for some kind of perpetual check here. So, very important not to rush. I paused and realized that queen a7 is the key. In an ideal scenario, I would have found queen a7 check before I took on c7, but it is what it is. Okay, this is almost mate, but the rook can block on c1, so let me eliminate the rook so that there's no way to block the check. So get rid of the rook. And then if he takes, then I check on a1. I'm not sure if the accuracy score is exactly correct, but I think this is tracking everything that I've done so far. It looks like 99.5% accuracy. I think there's probably been like one or two puzzles somewhere in the 169 that I've made some slight error on or something. Okay. Hold on. Let me double check my calendar real quick. Make sure I'm not about to mess myself up with my schedule. No, I'm okay. Okay, all good. So I think here you eliminate the knight and then take the pawn, and I don't really see a great way to stop mate on g7. So I think we'll do that. Take the knight, take the pawn, and then, yeah, mate on g7 next move. They can play rook e7, but then you can either take the rook or mate on f8. Three-piece lineup. Discovered attack available. Need to get the knight out of the way. Knight f4 check or knight e3. I don't know if it matters which one. Knight e3 feels a little bit better because it opens up the second rank, I guess. But I really can't imagine it makes a huge difference. So I'm going to go knight e3. Yeah, it says knight f4 also works. Okay. Let's see here. Knight h6 check, king moves. I don't see the immediate follow-up. The queen is protecting two things at the same time that are both attacked. So I think I can take the knight and then take the rook. So take the knight, take the rook, and then we're just up a piece. This is attacked and defended. Queen to c7 hits the king as well as the pawn. But black can block with the queen if we do that, and we don't have the time to take the pawn because our queen is hit. So I think we flip the moves around. I think we take the pawn first, then check, and then we take the bishop. So this is another move order one. Probably, again, for that reason, it might fall in the category or in the intermediate category, but we have to be careful about the move order for the tactic. You don't want to check, and then after queen e7, you can't take the pawn just yet. You want to take the pawn, then give the check. Okay. No good checks are available. This is really the only capture that makes any slight sense, and I think if the king takes, you get this check on the second rank. So I think we just net a pawn, and if he wants to take the bishop, we'll also get the exchange. Cool. This king is almost mated, but has a couple of escape squares. I think if I lock down those escape squares, I don't see a way to stop rook g5 checkmate. So I go rook d4, and then, yeah, I checkmate on g5 no matter what pretty soon. Undefended, undefended. No real way to check the king. Bit of a lineup. I'm already aiming towards something that's undefended, even though there's a few things in the way. So I think I can go knight c5 to attack both the rook and the bishop. If they take my knight, I take the rook, I'm up the exchange. If they move the rook or the bishop, I take whatever they don't move. That looks to win material here. No good checks right now. If I take the knight, the pawn takes back. That doesn't do a ton. I guess you have rook d3 and you pick up a pawn maybe. But I think it's even better to take the pawn and then fork on c3. The rook blocks. We'll eventually take the rook, and then we have a winning king and pawn in game. So I think that this is game over for sure. We've moved up into Alexander Kaufman, who you could argue at what level this particular player was world champion. I think he was world champion during this kind of weird time in chess where there was like a weird FIDE problem with PCA or the Professional Chess Association. I have some knowledge of it, but not a whole lot. But if you go by technicalities, I do think he was world champion. I think here we're taking the knight, checking. If the king moves rook e8, it will be mate soon. And instead, if the queen blocks, we go to f7, and then we'll mate soon there too. So I think we eliminate the defender, check, check, and then checkmate. Alright, our bishop is hit. No good checks. I don't think we want to take the pawn because I don't really see a follow-up there. Hey, how's it going? Colombian Genius, like the username? I'm doing well, hope you are too. Thanks for tuning in. I think bishop f6 is the move here. So if he takes us, we take back. We have this mate on g7 trend. Knight to g6 seems to be the only way to stop that, but then we take the knight and the king is just getting completely blasted open. So That looks good. And then, yeah, if the knight blocks, we take the knight, and then black's in huge trouble there. Queen is hit. This is attacked and defended. This is also attacked and defended. I can eliminate the knight, because if I get to take the pawn, I hit the king and the rook on c1. So I need to just clear out the way. I need to just clear out the way here. It mentions that if queen takes d4, we take with check, take the rook, and if the king moves to a different location, playing pawn to e3 check is even better, because you hit the king with check with the bishop, and then you take the queen, which also wins. Alright, h7 pawn attacked 3 times, defended 3 times. But I can eliminate the knight that's protecting it, which actually gets rid of 2 defenders with 1 move, and then take on h7 with checkmate. Glad to see you're doing instructional chess still. You used to coach me. Oh, very nice, very cool. You don't have to put your name in the chat if you don't want to dox yourself, but very cool that I coached you a few years ago in the past. Very nice to hear from you again. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, very nice to see you again. I don't know which person you are, but you don't have to put your name in the chat to, you know, that's maybe not always the smartest thing on the internet. But yeah, nice to see you again. So here, this is attacked and defended 1 time each. I think I can take this anyways, though, and then fork on e6, and then we are picking up the knight on b3. So I think we get 2 pieces for the rook. All right, this would be mate if the bishop was gone. That means the bishop is not really protecting the pawn, so I think I can take the pawn and then get the mate. What to do here? This check is covered. This check is covered. This check, oops, sorry, this check is covered. This check is covered. My arrows are really bad. If I capture here, the queen takes back, or the pawn takes. So what do we do? Checks, captures. This is unprotected. Oh, wait a second. So this check and this check are both covered by the same piece. If I make one of the 2 checks and then the other one, I think that works out. So if I check, rook takes, then check on f8, and then once the king moves, I go to d8. I think that's the way to do it here. Yeah, bishop h3. And I guess if the king moves, yeah, if the king moves, we had queen e5 check. I probably should have thought about that. But if the king goes to c7 or b8, we have queen e5 check. Let's see. I think we're on Vladimir Kramnik now. Lots of news about him recently. Not something super good by any means. So I think here, if we clear out the way for the bishop, we can take the pawn on d5, and this will be attacking the rook that's on a8, as well as aiming at the king on g8. So I think we take the pawn, then fork. If they block with the bishop, we'll take the bishop. If they move the king or block any other way, then we take the rook that's on a8 with extra material. All right, what to do here? I mean, rook a8 looks pretty good. King has to go to c7 to guard. If he takes on a6, I'll take with check, and then I should win the rook and pawn endgame. So king goes here. Then I think I have a7. He takes the pawn, I check, and then I promote. So this one's a little tricky because you have to recognize that you're almost kind of like trapping your own rook in the corner, but I'm going to now sacrifice the rook to buy myself time, promote the pawn next move, and then white's definitely winning there. All right, what to do here? Check, bishop takes. Don't see anything special there. Not capturing any of this stuff. I don't think I'm capturing the pawn when they can take with their own pawn, I suppose. Knight e5 threatens mate. If they take there, I mate on f7, so that looks pretty good. How many days or cycles am I going to do? The plan is to get it down to 1 day, doing all the puzzles in 1 day. I'm gonna try to do about 200 puzzles a day. We're on 187 on day 1, and I've been going for about 2 hours and 45-ish minutes. Probably we'll get to 200 in the next, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. So maybe it'll be about 3 hours for 200 puzzles. So if I'm doing 200 puzzles per day, that'll take about 6-ish days, a little under 6 days to do it. Then I'll try to cut it in half. Then it'll be about 3 days to do the whole thing, then about a day and a half. I'm going to try to get it down to about a day. That's the goal. You know, 1,128 puzzles in 1 day is going to take quite a long time, obviously, but that's the goal. It's not a number of cycles for me, it's more so just trying to get it down to 1 day. I think that would be the most fun and interesting, let's put it that way. I think I take the bishop. If the queen takes, I get the rook. Okay. Bishop b5 doesn't work, of course, because the bishop's pinned. There is a lineup here. I think I can do e4. e4. If he had taken with the pawn, I would have checked and then taken the bishop. Here I can take because the d-pawn's pinned. Do I have any personal goals, ratings, or knowledge? Goals, rating, or knowledge-wise, or am I mostly focused on coaching? My goal is still to work towards the international master title. I don't have any norms yet, so it's not exactly happening anytime soon. But that's still the goal, I would say. Quite a bit of rating to gain still, and 3 norms to get, but that's the goal. And then I'm still doing plenty of coaching for students in the meantime, and making Chessable courses, making YouTube videos, so lots of stuff, staying very busy. I think knight f6 is the move here. If the queen takes, I take this with check and then take the rook. And if the bishop takes, I have rook takes h5. I think that's the move here. Check, check. I think it's important that it's check, or else black would have like queen f3 check, which is kind of annoying. Alright. This is not mate. g8's also covered. There is a lineup here of 3 pieces. I think I pushed the pawn. And I'm threatening the checkmate on g7. But if the queen takes the pawn, then the rook is unprotected. I think that's a nice little interference idea. So this is an interference tactic. e7 kind of like just blocks off the 7th rank, and that gets the job done for us here as far as I can tell. Okay, queen is defended by rook. Pawn is defended by knight. Knight e6 hits everything, but it's also defended by everything in the world. But I think I can kind of clear out the noise here, so to speak. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate the well wishes. I think I can take the pawn. Knight takes. I cleared out the knight and the pawn. Then I can fork on e6. Rook takes, and then win the queen. I think that's the way to do it. Check, check, and win the queen. Yep, looks good. Okay, queen is hit, rook's hit. Gotta move the queen. I don't see any checks or captures. I don't want to take the knight and lose my queen. So I need to do something quite dangerous. It looks like I don't know if this is the Carlsen category or the Anand category, because they are both world champions. I think it's queen h6, and then if I lose the rook, I have knight g5, and then the mate is unstoppable. Now, probably black should not take the rook, but then the problem is I'm threatening knight g5 and taking the knight, so I think black is losing. Yeah, so they stop the knight g5 move, but they lose the knight on b4. If they had taken on b2, we would have an unstoppable mate on h7. Okay, 3-piece lineup. King, some different checks or captures are available. Do I take e3 with the knight or the bishop? That's what I'm leaning towards. Which one do I do? If I take with the bishop, bishop takes, take the rook, I lose my knight, which is not ideal. If I take with the knight, bishop takes, take the rook, that's good. If they take with the rook, bishop takes, queen takes, that's not as good. take. Now, I guess I don't have to take the rook right away since it's pinned. So maybe I take rook takes and then play some kind of rook e8 to pile up on the rook. Maybe that's the key. I think that's the idea here. Yeah, so I think I want to play rook e8 to hit the rook. I don't think I want to do it this way. I think I go rook e8. Okay, very nice. Yeah, I think if I take the rook right away, then the queen takes and white keeps everything defended. I like the idea of calling something a three-piece lineup rather than a pin, because the pin can also be a discovery under different circumstances. Yeah, so you can pin a piece, but then the piece that's being pinned, you know, the piece in the back of the pin, let's say, can also sometimes become a discovered attacking piece if they can move their own pinned piece out of the way. So, yeah, I was mentioning this earlier, mostly just talking about kind of this idea of like three-piece lineups, or like every tactic has a combination of three pieces. I think it's a very useful way of thinking about things. It's something I've come to appreciate more and more as I've been playing and coaching and stuff like that. So yeah, glad you like the way of calling it. No checks right now. Really, there's only two captures. I don't think I'm going to give the queen up. I think I take the pawn, then this pawn, and then I fork the king and the bishop. I think that's the way to go. Take, and then take. Alright, very close to 200. Okay, bishop is hanging. I can take there. I can also check on c7. c7, if the bishop takes, queen takes, that's game over. If they take the bishop, queen e7 is mate. And if they move the king, then I have a bunch of different discovered checks. Maybe rook takes c6 and hit the queen. So I think rook c7 is the way to go. Take here. And then, yeah, I hit the king, but I also take the queen on a6 next move. Alright, king. These checks just get captured. Lineup. Pawn's pinned. Three-piece lineup. I can take on f4, because if they take with the pawn, I win the queen. And if they take with the queen, I take the queen with the pawn. So I think I have the ability to take advantage of this pin g5 pawn. Kind of a weird pin that's aiming backwards, but it looks like it works nonetheless. And I think if they take the rook, we win the queen, we're up a piece, which is good. What book is this in Chessable? I can't find it. It is the Woodpecker method. The Woodpecker method. If you search in the search bar on Chessable for the Woodpecker method, it should be like the first one that comes up for sure. I can send a link if you really can't find it, but it's got like 2,600 reviews on the website, so they definitely want you to find it. That's for sure. Okay, so the rook is pinned, which is already a good start. I don't think I want to check on the back rank because black just blocks. That doesn't look like it gains a whole lot. There's this lineup that's also going on here. Bishop h5 looks pretty good because I pile up on the pinned piece. And if they play g6, then I can take the knight, which looks quite good. And if they take the bishop, I take the rook, which is good. I can also take the knight and then play bishop h5. I'm not sure if there's a difference between the two. Which of these is better? I have to be a little careful about the pawn, and I have to be a little careful about a check on e1, but I feel like both are good. Both should be good. I'm going to go for bishop h5. Okay, I guess that is the answer. And then take the knight. What does it say about this? It says rook takes f6, pawn takes, bishop h5. Yeah, there is queen b7. That's true. I didn't think about that. I didn't consider that black can just move back to defend. Okay, I got a little bit lucky on this one. I kind of coin flipped a little bit here, but bishop h5 is the correct answer. And then white eventually won the game, it looks like. What's my opinion on the difference between 1600 FIDE rated player and FM? What's the main difference? Hard to say just one main difference. I mean, the cop-out answer is pretty much the real answer is everything. That's kind of the cop-out answer at the same time. A FIDE master can calculate better than a 1600 FIDE rated player. They can play the opening better, the middle game better, the end game better, positional play, attacking, probably also a psychological things like time management's better for the higher rated player. Recognizing the critical moments probably better. But it's the same thing. If you say like, what's the difference between a GM and an FM? It's going to be the exact same answer. The GM's just better at everything. So there's really not one main difference. It'd be nice if I could, just give one specific thing that's different, but it's most likely going to be everything. But it feels very much like a cop-out answer. I understand. $40 US too much for me. I would recommend keeping there's almost always sales on Chessable. Maybe there's not right now, but there's probably going to be like a Black Friday sale pretty soon, and maybe in about a month or whatever, 3 weeks. So that course will for sure be on sale pretty soon, and they usually cut the course by like half price, or it might go from $40 US down to like 25 or 30. There's almost always the ability to get a discount on the courses. So I would wait till the course is on discount for sure. I think I take on f3 here, and then I take the pawn on g2, I think is the way to go. Now the question is, which rook do I take on g2 with? I can use this rook and then take on f3 and pick up a pawn. I can do it this way, but then I keep the rooks on the board. I think this one's better. Oh, okay. I don't actually want to take the rook. I want to make this check and then this check. And instead of picking up a pawn, I'm going to be up the exchange. Yeah, very welcome. Very welcome, survival savants. Wish you all the best as well, for sure. Okay, so I think we have 1 or 2 more puzzles here, and then we'll hit the 200, and then we'll pause for the day. So rook e7 threatens checkmate. Black can go rook g6, but then I take the bishop. That looks pretty good, because I have the d file here. How else do you stop the mate? You have to play rook f6 or here. I guess you could go rook d4. But then I think you just take that, and then you're still forking a bunch. So I think it's rook e7. Take d4, take again. The bishop is hit as well as the mate, and that's going to be it. All right, 200. We are now on Rustam Kazimjanov, I think is how you pronounce his name. This will be the last one I'm doing for the stream here. We're just about at 3 hours. I've got some other stuff I need to take care of, but yeah. Here it's this rook e1, queen takes queen, rook takes a1 type of idea. Check. Take the queen. And that is going to be it. All right, so we're going to pause off here. 200 exercises down. What is that? 928 more to go. What did we do? 200 in about 3 hours. I probably could have done the 200 in shorter than 3 hours, but what did this come out to? About a puzzle every minute. Yeah, I could have definitely done more than 1 puzzle a minute, but it's not necessarily just about the speed on first. I have to kind of work through some of the positions myself. Once we get around to the second cycle, then I'm gonna try to pick up the speed quite a bit, because yeah, I'm gonna try to get through eventually all puzzles in one day. It's a big task. It's gonna take quite a while, but that's the goal in a case like this. How would you compare the difficulty of your course Survive and Thrive in comparison to these puzzles? Survive and Thrive is going to be on the trickier side of things. The feedback I got on the course is that it's probably more in the like intermediate to advanced category. It's not going to have... There is a warm-up chapter in that course that has, I would say, like easier puzzles, but the bulk of the course is probably in the intermediate/advanced category of things. So they would be more difficult than these puzzles. I would also say at the end of the day that defensive puzzles are generally more difficult than offensive puzzles. Offensive puzzles, you're trying to like win material and, get a checkmate or pick up a piece. Defensive puzzles, you're trying to stop that from happening to your opponent, which is not always as clear cut. Like the end result is not you winning material, the end result is you not losing material, which is still very important, but it's not as clear cut for sure. I think it's a great course. It's got really good reviews overall, but it is on the, intermediate/advanced side of things for sure. Thank you, sir. See you next time. Appreciate all your teaching and coaching us for free. I appreciate you tuning in and watching. I'm also doing the training for myself at the same time. I'm working on my own calculation and tactical skills. So it's helping me. If it's helping you, it's also helping me at the same time, which is nice. All right, so 3 hours in, we're gonna pause off here. If anybody wants to watch the recording of this, I think it should be saved on the live tab on YouTube in my channel, so you can watch this again if you'd like to in the future. But yeah, I will be back again tomorrow at the same 10 a.m. Eastern time, whatever that corresponds to on your time zone. And I will be picking up here on exercise number 201. We'll finish up the easy chapter, which I think has another 24 puzzles, I think. And once we finish up the easy chapter, we'll move on into the intermediate chapters. I'll try to do another 200 puzzles tomorrow, somewhere in that range. Ultimately, I'm going to try to be able to do the whole course in about 6 or 7 days total, something like that. And then once I go through it on the next cycle, I'll cut it in half, do it even faster, then cut it in half a third time, do it even faster. And again, the goal is still to try to do all the puzzles in one day. That'll be a long day, but we'll eventually get there. All right, so thanks a lot for those of you who participated and tuned in. Let's see, Carocon versus French defense. What do you prefer? I know you have a French course that I will buy it next week. I play both. I've played the Carocon for probably about 3 years now. 3 years. The Carocon is great. The French defense, I think, is also very good. You know, I have to recommend the French because I've got a course on it, but I think both openings are great. Depends on, you know, each position, each opening gets you kind of slightly different versions of things. I do have a soft spot for the French, though, based on, you know, having made a course on it, but I appreciate you checking out the course. All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. Hope you guys have a good rest of the day. I'll be back again tomorrow to pick up at 10 a.m. Eastern time once more. And see you guys tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.